Chapter 758. Han Yunqi indeed hadn't eaten hot food for several days. If she could, she would try her best not to, because Gu Beiyue was waiting for her to save him. The longer the corpse ginseng's poison stayed in Gu Beiyue's leg, the more dangerous and difficult it was to remove. At this moment, looking at the steaming hot food, Han Yunqi didn't know if it was because of the heat, but her vision was a little blurry. Unlike Long Fei Ye's simple food, Gu was a very typical foodie. Even the takeout food was carefully selected and meticulously cooked. It could be said that it was full of color, aroma, and taste. He personally scooped a bowl of soup and handed it to Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi looked at the kettle and then looked at the hot soup. She asked confusedly, "What do I drink first?" "Drink a mouthful of water to moisten your throat, then drink the soup." Gu was very serious, and his voice was so gentle that he didn't realize it himself. Han Yunqi was really not used to his seriousness. It made her very uncomfortable in front of him, and she couldn't relax. She sniffled, and her vision suddenly became much clearer. Her heart also seemed to calm down a lot. "We're in a hurry. Why are you so particular?" She took the hot soup and drank it in big mouthfuls. This was the first time Han Yunqi accepted Gu's kindness. A bowl of hot soup in the wilderness was a bowl of very common ribs and corn, but the taste was delicious that Han Yunqi would never forget in her life. Gu saw that Han Yunqi drank it, and was in a very good mood. He hurriedly scooped rice for her. Not to mention a meal, as long as she accepted, he would help her fish and pluck the moon in the water and the stars in the sky. Just as he was about to hand the rice to Han Yunqi, she didn't notice and nimbly helped the heavily injured Su Donglin into the carriage. She asked, "Old ghost, can you help him treat his injuries?" Gu glanced at him and said disdainfully, "Useless thing. I don't need his help." Su Donglin suddenly roared, "I'd rather die than need his help." Han Yunqi certainly understood Su Donglin's anger. Su Donglin had clearly heard what Gu had just said to Qi Zonglin. Han Yunqi knew that Gu's mouth was vicious, but his heart wasn't that vicious. He must have just arrived. Otherwise, he wouldn't have waited until the shadow guard was completely annihilated before showing himself. Gu didn't even bother to look at Su Donglin's anger. In fact, Han Yunqi didn't fully understand Gu. He was a very decisive and extreme person. If he liked something, he would do whatever it took to get it. If he didn't like something, he wouldn't care about that person's life or death. Similarly, he would never change. He was a good person, but at the same time, he was also a truly heartless person. He did arrive after the shadow guard was completely annihilated. However, if he had arrived earlier, he would have only helped Han Yunqi for the sake of Han Yunqi. He wouldn't have saved the shadow guard. Idiot! How can you believe what he said to deceive Qi Zonglin? If we didn't need his help, you and I would have been dead long ago. Han Yunqi glared at Su Donglin. Su Donglin finally wilted and didn't say anything. Gu actually didn't argue with Su Donglin. After treating Su Donglin's injuries, he placed a bowl of hot rice in front of Han Yunqi. "Poison girl, eat while it's hot. Hurry." Although it was difficult to refuse Gu's kindness, how could Han Yunqi still be in the mood to eat? She looked at the ground full of corpses, and the circle of terrifying poison corpses that didn't move. Her heart was like a stone that fell into a deep lake and kept sinking, as if it would never reach the bottom. After a long while, she finally turned to look at Gu. "Old ghost, help me bury them all." Gu didn't say much. He knew that Han Yunqi wouldn't be able to eat, so he casually threw away the bowl of fragrant white rice and rolled up his sleeves to get to work. Using his sword as a shovel, he dug a large hole and buried the 50 or so shadow guard corpses. All of the swords also went into eternal rest with them. There was no time to grieve. Gu dispersed the poison corpses, and they quickly continued on their way. Gu acted as the coachman. They left the small road and openly took the main road. He had personally come to pick up Han Yunqi. That meant he wasn't afraid of anyone, including Medical City. "When did you raise so many poison corpses?" Han Yunqi finally asked. From what she knew, it wasn't easy to raise a poison corpse. "I've been raising them in Medicine Ghost Valley. This time, I specially brought them out for the world to see." Gu smiled cold. "You're harming esteemed Wangfei again." Su Donglin bluntly rebuked. Esteemed Wangfei's identity as a remnant of the poison sect had already been widely spread, and the medical academy had been doing all sorts of things. With Gu's ruckus, esteemed Wang Fei's crime would be confirmed. Weren't poison corpses and poison Gu what everyone feared? What's there to be afraid of? This young master was the one who raised these poison corpses. I'll take care of them. Gu was very relaxed. What are you trying to do? There's no need for you to take the blame for me. Han Yunqi said unhappily. She was very clear in her heart that Gu was doing this to divert everyone's attention to himself. He even wanted to take the blame for her identity as a remnant of the poison sect. After all, he was once the foster son of the medical academy's head elder. If news of this spread, the medical academy would never forgive him. Han Yunqi didn't want to hide her identity forever and be a coward. But she also didn't want to be labeled as a remnant of the poison sect. This matter couldn't be rushed or impulsive. Their current forbearance wasn't cowardice, but a chance to reveal the truth and clear their names. With Han Yunqi's current understanding of the medical academy, she didn't believe that those old men were anything good. Gu looked back and chuckled. Poison lass. If Chi brother wanted to take the blame for you, he would have had the poison corpses exterminate everyone in Carefree City long ago. Chi brother only wants to warn a certain someone. Just wait and see. You're provoking the medical academy. Han Yunqi understood. No, you're Chi brother. I'm warning Gu Yuntian. Gu's clear eyes glittered with ruthlessness and the pleasure of revenge. The army of poison corpses in his hands had always been hidden in the Medicine Ghost Valley and had never been brought out. He had carefully raised them in preparation for the day when he would deal with Medical City, although the time wasn't right yet. If the people of Medical City dared to touch Poison Lass in the slightest, he wouldn't mind a mutual destruction. Presumably, the news would spread out in Carefree City very soon, and Gu Yintian would soon understand what he meant. As for why he didn't poison the people of Carefree City, it was purely because he didn't want Han Yunqi to be cursed as cruel and discredit the poison sect. He couldn't bear to see the world cursing Poison Lass. He had to make Poison Lass acknowledge her ancestors in a glorious way. Han Yunqi was shocked. She vaguely felt that Gu, a genius from the medical academy, should know some secrets. You, she was about to ask when Gu suddenly turned around and looked at her. Poison Lass, do you trust Chi brother? Han Yunqi was both doubtful and perplexed, but she couldn't refuse Gu Qixiao's clear, pure eyes. For some reason she nodded. I do. Greatly delighted, Gu burst into laughter. He waved his whip and galloped on the spacious road. When the carriage disappeared at the end of the road, a master and his disciple walked out from the roadside. Master, who is that Gu exactly? The disciple asked. Interesting, hee. The master stroked his beard and chuckled. Let's go. There should be a good show to watch very soon. The disciple was obviously confused, but he didn't ask any questions. The master and disciple headed north. The more the junior brother thought about it, the more confused he became. The master and disciple clearly didn't want the eldest senior brother to hurt Han Yunqi. So why did they instigate the people of Carefree City to kill Han Yunqi? Did the master and disciple want Han Yunqi to live, or Han Yunqi to die? Or perhaps neither was the case. If neither was the case, then wouldn't it be better to die than to live? Carefree City did indeed spread the news quickly. They even slandered Han Yunqi, saying that the remnants of the poison sect were too powerful, and that there would be endless trouble if they didn't get rid of her. When Long Feiyi received the news, he didn't relax for an entire day. He knew what Gu wanted to do. In the end, he was worried about Han Yunqi. He wanted nothing more than to recover immediately, so he could go down the mountain and chase after them. Unfortunately, he really couldn't go down the mountain. Gu, who is he? The old man in Kenzo was curious. Gu Qixia. Long Feiyi replied indifferently. Realization dawned on the old man in Kenzo. So it's him. He's quite bold to provoke Medical City like this. Even to the old man in Kenzo, Long Feiyi still didn't reveal Gu's undying body. A gentleman's word couldn't be taken back. He'd agreed to keep Gu's immortality a secret, and Gu had agreed to keep Mute Granny's secret. Long Feiyi changed the subject. Master, how did you save Duan Muyao last time? Long Fei had only thought of the matter after 2 days of recuperation and free time. The old man in Kinzo still didn't look too good at the mention of Duan Muyao. The only way to truly let go was to forget Luo Qingling, right? He'd remembered her for a lifetime. How could he forget her at his age? However, the old man in Kinzo was no longer deformed when facing this longing, but sober. Her dantian was heavily injured, causing her to lose all of her internal energy, and unable to gather qi. As long as there's enough true qi, it can be nurtured and temporarily restored. All she needs to do is find a wondrous medicine to repair it. The old man in Kinzo replied without holding back. What medicine? Long Feiyi asked hastily. The old man in Kinzo whispered 4 words into Long Feiye's ear, causing Long Feiye's expression to shift. Got it. Then he told the old man in Kinzo how Gu Beiyue's true qi had rebounded. The old man in Kinzo was astonished. It looks like this person is incredible. What do you mean? Long Feiyi didn't understand. He's a once-in-100 years genius. His body must have been born from the jaws of death. Once he recovers from his injuries, his internal energy will increase exponentially. Neither you nor I will be able to deal with him, the old man in Kinzo said seriously. Fei, who is he? Long Feiye's eyes darkened. After a long time he replied, a friend. He didn't elaborate but asked, Master, is there any news about that wondrous medicine you mentioned? The old man in Kinzo had already sent people to search for it in order to save Duan Muyao. There's still no news. The old man in Kinzo hesitated before speaking. Are you really going to save this person? Long Feiye's eyes were hooded, making it impossible to see his expression. But his tone was resolute. I have to. News had reached Celestial Mountain, so it naturally spread to other places as well. Western Zhou and Tianan still hadn't publicly declared their stance. Ning Cheng was currently fighting with Chu Tianin on the battlefield, but he'd sent word to the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate to hand over Han Yunxi. Otherwise, he'd wipe out the Chu clan troops and march south to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. As for the Medical Academy, Chapter 759. As soon as news of the poisoned corpses reached the Medical Academy, the Council of Elders was the first to explode. Head Elder Ling Gai and Fourth Elder Mu Lianxin had long been banished from Medical City for inducing premature labor, and lost their qualifications to practice medicine forever. Only Second Elder Li Xiuyuan, Third Elder Shin Jueming, and Fourth Elder Li Tianxi remained. During this period of time, the three of them were looking for candidates among the several directors. They wanted to recommend 2 elders to fill the vacancies. When they received the news, they happened to summon Luo Zuishan for a chat. It had to be said that the news was too shocking. Even in front of Luo Zuishan, Second and Fourth Elder couldn't control their emotions. Gu, where did this guy come from? He can't be a descendant of the poison sect, can he? He actually raised so many poison corpses. His motives are unfathomable. I heard that Han Yunxi has a close relationship with that Gu. Even if Gu isn't a member of the poison sect, he's definitely connected to them. Third Elder Shin was the calmest of the lot. He had a personal relationship with both Han Yunxi and Gu, but he didn't know what to say now that news had spread. He refused to believe that a woman like Han Yunxi was a descendant of the poison sect who would raise poison corpses to harm the world. Until he figured out the truth, he chose to remain silent. Luo Zuishan was also silent, but his chest and back were covered in sweat. Before long, his clothes were completely soaked. Those who didn't know better would think he was sweating from the heat. He wanted nothing more than to fly to South Ning right now, tie up Xiao Qi, and hide him. That stinking brat actually raised so many poison corpses? What is he planning? Does he think he can be so arrogant just because he can't die? Doesn't he know that once his secret is exposed, he'll suffer a fate 100 times worse than Han Yunxi's? Han Yunxi doesn't even like him, so what's he playing the hero for? Nonsense. Childish. Fool. Luo Zuishan cursed Gu in his heart, but in the end, his eyes couldn't help but tear up. He muttered to himself, Xiao Qi. Oh Xiao Qi, you've left medical school for so many years. Why did you have to come back? Have you forgotten all the hardships you've gone through in the past? Why can't you grow up? After Luo Zuishan left the Council of Elders, he was in an out-of-body state. He didn't know how he got back to his residence. He still kept the house where he had taken little Seven in, and it was untouched. He would never forget that child's body that was riddled with scars, his soul that was riddled with holes, and his eyes that were filled with despair but stubbornness. At that time, he knew that Xiaoqi would come back for revenge one day. From then on, he prayed every day, praying that Xiaoqi could truly grow up, forget his hatred, and become a human again. One had to know that people who lived in hatred were the most pitiful, especially those who lived their entire lives for revenge. They were even more pitiful. Since he had already left, wouldn't it be better to change his name and live on properly? At this moment, the head of the medical school, Academy head Gu Yuntian, was in the poison sect's forbidden grounds. His hands were clasped behind his back as he stood at the edge of a bottomless pit, looking up at the bright moon in the sky. He was dressed in elegant crescent white robes, and his ink-black hair was pulled back. He looked casual, but he wasn't lazy. His age had added to his mature and steady aura. He was an immortal doctor, extraordinary and refined. Of course, this was all an illusion. Another person stood next to him, the one who had been expelled from the medical school, Head Elder Ling Gai. After being expelled from Medical City, Head Elder Ling had traveled through several cities like a rat on the street. After being beaten up a few times, he had secretly returned to the medical school. With Gu Yuntian's protection, it wasn't difficult for him to sneak in and out of the medical school. The moonlight shone down on the mountain, and the forest should be filled with the chirping of insects on a summer night. However, this was the poison sect, so not a sound could be heard. In contrast to the intense reactions of the Council of Elders and the Vice Academy heads, Gu Yuntian was strangely calm about the poison corpses. After a while he sighed softly. Gu Qisha Gu Yuntian, hee interesting. In the end, Head Elder Ling wasn't as calm as Gu Yuntian. As soon as Gu Yuntian spoke, he couldn't help but say, "Academy head, that brat definitely didn't lose his memories back then. He lied to us." Back then, Xiaoqi had been infected with the plague, and his pulse had stopped. The two of them had thought that he was dead. Gu Yuntian had been very sad, so he'd sat at Xiaoqi's feet and chatted with Head Elder Ling about the past. He'd also mentioned many things about the poison sect, including the poison nurturing arts. Even Juni Xia of the 100 Poison sect couldn't nurture so many poison corpses. Xiaoqi must have eavesdropped on their conversation and learned the secret recipe for nurturing poison humans and poison corpses. Thus, it was very likely that Gu was the Xiaoqi from back then. After the medical school destroyed the poison sect, they took control of the poison nurturing arts and didn't destroy them. Instead, the academy head kept them safe and passed them down through the generations. Poison corpses and even poison Gu were far superior to martial arts. In the end, the medical school couldn't bear to destroy such powerful weapons. Perhaps that girl called Han Yunqi taught him. It's not certain whether this Gu is my Xiaoqi or not, Gu Yuntian said indifferently. Gu Qisha suddenly turned over a new leaf and joined forces with Han Yunqi to set up Pilfine Pharmacy. Gu is also proficient in poison arts, and often goes in and out of Pilfine Pharmacy. I think there's a good chance that this is the case. He clearly knows that the poison sect is at the heart of the storm, but he still brought out poison corpses. This is clearly a provocation. Head Elder Ling was afraid. His reputation was already in tatters. If anything happened to Gu Yuntian, no one would be able to protect him. Seeing that Gu Yuntian didn't respond, Head Elder Ling continued. Academy head. As I see it, that girl Han Yunqi probably doesn't know how to nurture poison. She's skilled in detoxification but not in poisoning. Gu is Xiaoqi from back then. There's no mistaking it. He's raised so many poison corpses, so he must be back for revenge. Academy head. I think it's best to be cautious about this matter. If Xiaoqi really does know what happened back then, and tells everyone, will he just say that he knows? Even if he tells everyone, someone has to believe him. Gu Yuntian wasn't afraid of this at all. Xiaoqi. It's been so many years since we last met. As his father, I've missed him a lot. Gu Yuntian's attention was completely on Han Yunqi. We'll know the truth once we capture that girl and ask her. Gu Yuntian laughed heartily. Back then, The medical academy had destroyed the poison sect, but unfortunately, they hadn't managed to wipe out all of their bloodlines. Gu Yuntian only knew about the remnants of the poison sect, but he didn't know how powerful they were or where they resided. His previous academy heads had spared no effort to secretly search for the remnants of the poison sect, but Gu Yuntian wasn't interested. It wasn't until he lost Xiao Qi as a living test subject that he began to take an interest in the poison sect's Gu poison arts, the human Gu. Although the poison sect had only proposed the idea of using humans as Gu for immortality, without a specific method to nurture them, Gu Yuntian firmly believed that the poison sect's descendants were still researching this. Perhaps he hadn't missed a single clue over the years. Because of what happened with Long Tianma, he had set his sights on 100 Poison sect, and Shi Yuba was still locked up in the dungeons. Unfortunately, neither of these clues had led him to any progress. Now that Han Yunqi's identity had been exposed, he was undoubtedly excited. Academy head, we should still be careful. Head Elder Ling wanted to persuade him again, but Gu Yuntian changed the topic. Qin Shenli still hasn't given us a clear answer. It looks like Celestial Mountain has completely fallen into Long Fei Ye's hands. Head Elder Ling was familiar with Gu Yuntian's temper, so he had no choice but to give up. Long Fei Yi, that brat, is clearly challenging the medical academy. All the other countries are avoiding Han Yunqi like the plague, but he's still protecting her. Academy head, if this person takes over the world, he'll definitely threaten the prestige of our medical academy. Head Elder Ling was holding a grudge. Madame Lianxin had betrayed him, and all she wanted was to revive the Mu clan. The only people who could afford to pay her were Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi, who controlled Medicine City. Ning Cheng is a pretty good choice. That brat knows how to adapt to circumstances. Gu Yuntian said playfully. He'd been obsessed with medical experiments all his life, and had never cared about the politics of the imperial court. He really didn't understand this field. Academy head, you mean? Head Elder Ling grew suspicious. 10 days later, the medical academy still hadn't received a reply from Celestial Mountain. However, Gu Yuntian personally issued an ultimatum to all doctors in Medicine City and the South Central regions. He demanded that Medicine City cut off all business with Pilfine Pharmacy or face the consequences. He also demanded that all doctors withdraw from the South Central regions or be disqualified from practicing medicine. Medicine City couldn't take the pressure anymore. Elder Wang of the Wang family wrote several letters to Long Fei Yi, and the South Central region's governor's manor sent an endless stream of urgent messages to Celestial Mountain. Long Fei Yi and Elder Kinzo hadn't expected Gu Yuntian to be so ruthless. Their stalling plan hadn't even lasted a month. If it weren't for Elder Kinzo and the 3 venerated elders stopping him, Long Fei Yi would have left the mountain long ago. He couldn't bear to let Han Yunqi face this situation alone. Since he couldn't leave the mountain, he frequently communicated with Gu Beiwe to discuss countermeasures. 3 days later, Han Yunqi and Gu returned to South Ning Prefecture. Although she heard a lot of news along the way, Han Yunqi didn't immediately rush to the governor's manor. Instead, she went straight to the Duke of Qin's estate to find Gu Beiwe. However, as soon as she arrived, she saw a large group of officials from the governor's manor, as well as the heads of the 5 great clans of the South Central regions, blocking the entrance. Han Yunqi knew Medical City's movements like the back of her hand, so she naturally knew what these people were here for. Before she could get out of the carriage, a group of people suddenly rushed out from around her. There were both soldiers and guards, all of them surrounding the carriage. "You're courting death." Gu's expression was gloomy. He hadn't been in a good mood these past few days. Gu Yuntian wasn't afraid of his threats. It seemed that he'd overestimated Gu Yuntian's intelligence and hadn't given him a clear warning. Han Yunqi stopped him from drawing his sword. She got out of the carriage and looked around. "Cold," she said. "This princess is in a hurry to save someone, so I'll have to trouble everyone to make things easier for me. If there's anything else, please wait." Clan head Xiao, the head of the 5 great clans, laughed out loud. "Save someone? Han Yunqi, you're a remnant of the poison sect, aren't you? Don't even think about entering the Duke of Qin's estate today. Men, seize her and send her to Medical City." Chapter 760. Han Yunxi had left the heavily injured Long Fei Yi at Celestial Mountain and traveled thousands of li without rest just to buy time to treat Gu Beiyue's poison. Her willingness to speak politely to these people was already giving them a lot of face. Her phoenix eyes were frighteningly gloomy. Since you don't want face, don't blame this princess for being impolite. She clearly didn't know martial arts, but the murderous aura she exuded intimidated the guards and soldiers, so much that none of them dared to take a step forward. What are you all standing around for? Go after the old man, capture her, and you'll be heavily rewarded. Patriarch Xiao roared. Han Yunxi pushed Su Donglin forward and ordered coldly. Su Donglin, watch carefully. Kill anyone who dares to move. This subordinate obeys. As soon as Su Donglin obeyed, the shadow guards hiding in the surroundings all appeared. Although there weren't many of them, it was enough to intimidate everyone present. Old ghost, take me in, Han Yunxi said in a low voice. Gu had been waiting for her to say this. Desperate times called for desperate measures. He happily wrapped his arm around Han Yunxi's waist and borrowed a bit of strength to soar into the air. Dressed in luxurious red robes, the devilish red covered the sky and earth. It was very beautiful. When Han Yunxi climbed over the Duke of Qin's mansion's high walls, she heard the angry protests of several patriarchs. We want to see His Highness Duke of Qin. His Highness Duke of Qin must have been bewitched by this poison woman. If this poison woman isn't eliminated, the South will perish. This is simply a rebellion. This poison woman is openly rebelling. Where's General Bailey? Does General Bailey not care about matters? Han Yunxi hadn't even reached the ancestral hall when large groups of soldiers swarmed towards the Duke of Qin's mansion and started fighting with the shadow guards. Patriarch Xiao declared that he would attack the Duke of Qin's mansion and capture Han Yunxi to rid the people of the south. The sound of fighting was very loud. Han Yunxi had no choice but to stop and look back. Are they really fighting? The shadow guards had no problem dealing with this group of soldiers. However, once there were casualties, it would be used by people with ulterior motives to cause internal strife in the central and southern regions. In fact, ordinary people were the most vulnerable to the effects of Gu. Not to mention that the situation was really bad under the comprehensive sanctions of Medical City. They were already beset with external threats. If the South Central regions had internal strife as well, the Commander-in-Chief's estate would become Cloud Realm Continent's biggest joke. Seeing that Han Yunxi was worried, Gu said impatiently, Poison girl, don't worry. Chi brother, will deal with them myself. Han Yunxi quickly stopped him. If Gu summoned the poison corpse to deal with those people, she wouldn't be able to clear her name, even if she jumped into the Yellow River. Old fiend, you don't understand the situation at the Commander-in-Chief's estate in the South Central regions. We can let the world have a handle on us, but we can't let the 5 great clans do the same, Han Yunxi said seriously. Long Fei Yi wasn't here, so how were they supposed to deal with these powerful and influential families? On one hand, there was the danger of internal strife, while on the other, Gu Beiyue couldn't wait any longer. Han Yunxi was burning with anxiety as she racked her brains. At this moment, Bailey Mingxiang hurried out of the bamboo forest in the ancestral hall and shouted from a distance, Esteemed Wang Fei, you finally returned. Seeing Bailey Mingxiang in such a hurry, Han Yunxi didn't hesitate to rush over. How's Gu Beiyue? Esteemed Wang Fei, Dr. Gu knows you're coming back today and has been waiting for you. Esteemed Wang Fei, you should hurry over. Dr. Gu said that there's no need to worry about the matters outside. My father will bring his troops here very soon, Bailey Mingxiang said, panting for breath. Bring his troops here. Han Yunxi was a little surprised. That's right. Dr. Gu said that in times of prosperity, military might rules. In times of chaos, military might rules. His father has already brought his troops to lie in ambush nearby. When they make a bigger fuss, they'll be arrested under the pretext of insurrection, Bailey Mingxiang said seriously. Han Yunxi understood now. This was a true example of extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. The political power of the South Central region's Commander-in-Chief's estate was restricted by the 5 great clans. But military power had always been in the hands of the Bailey army. The Bailey army didn't just control the navy. Long before Tianning's civil strife and Long Fei Ye's invasion of the south, the Bailey army had already taken control of the major military forces in the south and central regions and reorganized them. Even the 5 great clans' greatest military force was only the officers and soldiers of the local government. How could they resist an army? When reason couldn't be explained clearly and public opinion couldn't be controlled, they could only use military force to speak. Although it wouldn't last long to use military and political pressure to rule a country, it could solve the most pressing problems and buy her time to deal with Medical City and Ningcheng. Han Yunqi had been puzzled before. She'd already arrived at the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate, but she still hadn't seen General Bailey. As it turned out, everything had been predicted by Gu Beiyue and arranged properly. This fellow who only treated illnesses and people was actually more skilled in the art of healing the country. His wisdom was like his gentleness, silently moisturizing things and disappearing with a flick of his sleeve, concealing his achievements and fame. Saving him is my greatest honor. Han Yunqi left these words behind as she practically ran through the bamboo forest. Very soon she came to a stop. Gu Beiyue was waiting for her in front of the ancestral hall. He was still sitting in a wheelchair, thin and weak, but the smile on his face was as warm as the spring breeze in April. It was enough to set her heart at ease in these chaotic times. How could there be such a person? He clearly couldn't stand up, but he wasn't in a sorry state at all. Han Yunqi thought that there was nothing in this world that could shatter the calmness in his eyes. There was also nothing filth that could stain his snow-white clothes. Han Yunqi really didn't have the heart to interrupt this peaceful moment. She wanted to stand for a while longer and look at him for a while longer, but time was of the essence. The detoxification system had long since reminded her that there was poison in Gu Beiyue's leg and had already begun to analyze the situation. The detoxification system told her that the corpse ginseng could still be cured and could still be removed. In fact, Gu Beiyue had been looking at her the entire time. He also wanted to look at her for a while longer and quietly look at her for a while. However, his eternal gaze only lasted for a moment. He was still the same as before, humbly bowing with clasped hands. Esteemed Wang Fei, you've had a hard journey. I'm sorry I'm late. Han Yunqi immediately pushed him into the room and called for an attendant to help him sit on the couch. She nimbly took out a set of gold needles and some medicine. While she was making preparations, she also discussed the poisoning situation with Gu Beiyue. She also discussed how Gu Beiyue had been using acupuncture to suppress the poison's eruption these past few days. Han Yunqi was still curious as to when Gu Beiyue learned how to use acupuncture to suppress the poison. She didn't expect that he had sealed many of the major acupuncture points in his legs, slowing down the flow of blood. If I came late, even the gods wouldn't be able to save your legs, Han Yunqi angrily said. This was the only way. Otherwise, esteemed Wang Fei wouldn't have rushed over. Gu Beiyue spoke the truth. If it wasn't for this, he wouldn't have been able to stop Han Yunqi from rushing over. There must be a spy in the manor. We must find him. How did you get poisoned? Han Yunqi seriously asked. Gu Beiyue didn't answer. Did you suddenly discover that you were poisoned, or did you touch something? Han Yunqi asked again. Only Gu Beiyue still didn't answer. She raised her head and saw Gu Beiyue looking down at her. That pair of clean and pure eyes were so warm that it could melt a boulder. He gently placed his finger on his lips and softly said, Esteemed Wang Fei, you've never been distracted when helping people cure poisons. Shoo. No matter how restless Han Yunqi's heart was, it was instantly calmed down. That's right. When she was curing poisons, she was completely focused. She didn't allow anyone to disturb her, nor did she allow herself to be distracted. She nodded and quickly entered a state of mind. She wanted to help Gu Beiyue roll up his trousers, but Gu Beiyue was a step ahead and rolled it up himself. Esteemed Wang Fei, I've been rude. He had always been polite, and Han Yunqi was used to it. But this sentence made Han Yunqi feel alienated. She didn't answer, and began to seriously search for acupuncture points. Han Yunqi didn't know that this wasn't alienation, but because he was a servant, and he couldn't accept her service. Bailey Mingxiang was just about to enter when he heard Gu Beiyue's words. His heart couldn't help but ache. There was no such thing as empathy in this world, but there were people who sympathized with each other. Only those who had truly experienced it would be able to understand and see through it. Even though Dr. Gu was so modest and polite, Bailey Mingxiang could see with a single glance that Dr. Gu had feelings for Han Yunxi. Moreover, this feeling wasn't inferior to Gu's love that everyone knew. How much did he like her for him to be willing to carefully hide his feelings, never allowing himself to reveal anything? Only then would he be willing to go against his heart and show alienation again and again. Bailey Mingxiang understood this. Bailey Mingxiang silently assisted Han Yunxi, using a special medicine to remove the needles. Han Yunxi quickly found an acupuncture point and began to insert the needles. This time, she didn't use many needles, but she used them very deeply. Not long after, black blood came out of the acupuncture point and slowly flowed down Gu Beiyue's calf. Han Yunxi noticed that although Gu Beiyue's leg was thin, the muscles were firm. This should be the result of a lot of exercise. Did this fellow usually exercise a lot? This thought flashed through her mind, but Han Yunxi didn't have time to think about it. This was because the corpse ginseng's poison was hidden very deeply, and the detoxification process was very slow. Without a full day of work, it probably wouldn't be finished. She was exhausted from the journey, so she had to conserve her energy as much as possible. The bamboo forest separated them from the clamor outside the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunxi concentrated on detoxification just like before, while Gu Beiyue looked at her quietly with his head bowed. He didn't know what her world was like, but his was completely silent. Miss Yunxi, long time no see. He sighed with emotion in his heart. If they were distant, he would call her esteemed Wang Fei. If they were close, he could just call her Miss Yunxi. Only he himself knew the meaning behind this Miss Yunxi. Actually, Gu was very quiet right now as well. He was leaning against the door without making a sound. There was a bamboo forest and a high wall, completely isolating the clamor outside the door. General Bailey personally led a team of elite soldiers stationed in South Ning to surround the troublemakers. Both sides were in the middle of a discussion. It wasn't until nightfall that Han Yunxi finally managed to expel all the poison from Gu Beiyue's leg. She even gave him a few massages to unblock his meridians and move his joints. She exhaled and finally revealed a smile. Dr. Gu, it's all right now. Esteemed Wang Fei, I'm sorry I couldn't meet you at the city gates, Gu Beiyue said apologetically. He'd promised her that before. Then let me see you stand up with my own eyes. Han Yunxi said seriously. All right. Gu Beiyue's reply was full of strength. He carefully landed on the ground. Han Yunxi wanted to help him up, but he refused. He held onto the bamboo bed until he steadied himself, before slowly rising to his feet. He'd stood up. Very steadily. Han Yunxi's heart was filled with excitement as she finally said, Gu Beiyue, long time no see. Really, it had been a long time. Esteemed Wang Fei, once this one stands up, the commander-in-chief's estate in South Ning will never fall. Gu Beiyue said seriously. Perhaps he should make a trip back to Medical City. Chapter 761. As soon as Gu Beiyue finished speaking, Gu walked in with a chuckle. Poison lass, with Qi brother here, no one can bully you. Internal and external troubles, Medical City's pressure, Medicine City's troubles, Ning Cheng's threats, the aristocratic family's coercion, and the world's criticism. All of the pressure on Han Yunxi's shoulders seemed to disappear in an instant. Actually, she knew that there was no way she'd be able to cure Gu Beiyue's legs and go back immediately. Gu Beiyue was risking his life for them, so how could she just leave? Long Fei Yi wasn't here, so she had to stay. She had to do everything in her power to protect Long Fei Yi's empire. How great would it be if Long Fei Yi was here as well? Then they could go all out and topple this world where Medical City reigned supreme. They could break all the rules and establish their own world order. Actually, Han Yunxi didn't know that although Long Fei Yi was on Celestial Mountain, he had never stopped exchanging letters with Gu Beiyue. He'd been fighting side by side with them this entire time. More accurately, he'd been leading them all this time. We'll discuss the poison sect in detail later. I'm going outside to take a look, Han Yunxi said seriously. The situation outside hadn't dispersed yet, so she was still worried. Gu Beiyue accompanied her out of the bamboo forest and listened by the wall, not allowing her to leave. Esteemed Wangfei, are you still worried about this one's work? Han Yunqi was speechless. She suddenly felt that Gu Beiwe was different from before, but she couldn't pinpoint what. Gu didn't have much patience to begin with, so when he saw Han Yunqi listening by the wall, he patiently accompanied her. General Bailey had used the excuse of a riot and trespassing on the Duke of Qin's estate to suppress the 5 great clans. But no one had been able to reason with a soldier like him. General Bailey displayed the meaning of the saying, when a scholar meets a soldier, he has a reason to speak clearly to the extreme. Patriarch Xiao was a smart man. He knew that the people would not fight with the officials, and the officials would not fight with the army. Although the 5 aristocratic families controlled a lot of power in the central and southern regions, they could indirectly restrain the army. For example, provisions, weapons, and so on. However, all of this had to be done in the long run. At least for the next few months, the 5 aristocratic families really couldn't do anything to the military. House Lord Xiao was the first to give in. General Bailey, is Han Yunqi really the poison sect's descendant? How much trouble will she bring to the South Central region? Why don't we sit down and discuss this? If she can convince the old man will fully support her. If she can't, then we'll make another plan. What do you think? I can't promise her, Han Yunqi said to herself. As expected, General Bailey immediately refused. He claimed that old man Tianshan Kenzo hadn't given Medical City a clear answer yet, and that the poison sect matter was purely a rumor spread by someone with ulterior motives to slander the Duke of Qin's estate. As for Gu raising poison corpses, esteemed Wangfei had nothing to do with it. General Bailey firmly refused the 5 aristocratic families and ordered soldiers to surround South Ning City, declaring that the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate would fight Medical City to the end. With this military order, the 5 aristocratic families and the South Central region's officials knew that the situation was set. Patriarch Xiao angrily spat out, "General Bailey, just you wait. In less than 3 months, the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate will be destroyed by that woman." In truth, Han Yunqi knew very well that if she couldn't keep the medical community here, the commoners would either migrate or riot. The South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate would fall. Thus, every minute and second that followed was extremely important. On the way back, Han Yunqi had some ideas in mind. As the group sat down in a pavilion in the garden, Han Yunqi said seriously, "The most important thing right now is to withdraw the doctors. We need to find a countermeasure immediately to reduce the pressure on the medical community." Gu Beiwe said, "I've already counted. As of 3 days ago, about 80% of the South Central region's medical centers have closed. The remaining 20% are overcrowded. Midsummer is full of dysentery, so the number of patients will only increase, not decrease. This one has already sent all of Pilfine Pharmacy's resident physicians back, as well as contacted a few good friends. Many of their disciples are willing to come and practice medicine. However, I'm afraid they won't last more than a month or 2. This is even more terrifying than a famine." Han Yunqi hated it so much that her teeth itched. Medical City's methods were probably the first of its kind in history. A doctor had the heart of a parent, but those people from Medical City had a heart of knives. Medical skills only had one use, and that was to save lives. However, those people used it as a weapon to seek power and the allegiance of the people. This was an unforgivable crime. Han Yunqi hesitated for a moment, then said seriously, "I plan to pay a high salary for the doctors. With a salary higher than that of a 5th-rank official, I'll pay the doctors a high salary every month. The medical centers will be built by the imperial court, and all of the medicine will be supplied by the imperial court. Moreover, before I announce this, I plan to acknowledge my status as a descendant of the poison sect and denounce Medical City in my own name." Han Yunqi sighed, then said coldly, "From what I understand, Medical City destroyed the poison sect just because of the idea of poison Gu humans. The poison sect never committed any heinous crimes, nor did they develop a recipe for raising poison Gu humans. In my opinion, Medical City destroyed the poison sect because they were using their position for personal gain to eliminate dissidents. Gu, who had been leaning against the wall in silence this entire time, immediately turned to look at Han Yunxi, his eyes dark and gloomy. It was impossible to tell what he was scheming. Bailey Mingxiang grew worried. Esteemed Wang Fei, once you acknowledge your status as a descendant of the poison sect, I'm afraid Medicine City will have no choice but to stop supplying medicine, right? Han Yunxi nodded. Medicine City's situation is very complicated. Not only do they fear Medical City, but more importantly, more than half of the elders in the new council are in favor of destroying the poison sect. However, even if I don't acknowledge it now, Medical City will still insist that I'm the descendant. Elder Wang won't be able to last until the end of the month. Han Yunxi sipped her tea, then said, I've already given orders to bring back all of the medicine from Pill Fiend Pharmacy's branches. Combined with the medicine stored in the main hall, we should be able to last the entire South Central region for about 3 months. If that's still not enough, perhaps I can discuss it with the King of Medicine. The King of Medicine had lived in seclusion for many years and had never interfered with worldly affairs. Naturally, he wouldn't give in to Medical City's whims. However, trying to take advantage of the King of Medicine wasn't something that could be accomplished with a simple beg. Han Yunxi only hoped that she wouldn't have to go that far. Gu Beiwei was about to speak when a commotion broke out outside the door. Chu Shifeng dashed over to report. Esteemed Wang Fei, something bad has happened. The 5 great clans had just left, so it was impossible for them to turn back. What kind of bad could have happened at a time like this? Han Yunxi's heart was filled with apprehension, while Chu Shifeng's expression looked like he was about to collapse. Esteemed Wang Fei, hurry and go take a look. There's a bunch of women holding babies outside. They've completely surrounded our doors. Women holding babies? What kind of situation is this? Han Yunxi's group rushed out the door, only to see dozens of women kneeling outside. They were all holding babies in their arms, ranging from infants in swaddling clothes to toddlers of 1 or 2 years old. The innocent children were all crying and wailing. Gu Beiwei was the first to notice the situation. In a low voice he murmured, Esteemed Wang Fei, I'm afraid these children are all sick. Han Yunxi's heart almost stopped beating. She couldn't look straight at the crying children, much less their innocent eyes and innocent faces. She knew what they were here for. The leader of the group carried a 1-year-old child as she walked forward. The child's face was red with tears and snot, his face completely red from crying. Gu Beiwei rushed over and gently touched the child's forehead. How many days has he had a fever? He asked in alarm. 3 days and 3 nights. Dr. Gu, I beg you to save my child. I'd rather be sick myself than let my child suffer. I've searched all over the medical centers, but there's no doctor, and I can't get in line. Even at Pill Fiend Pharmacy, it'll take 10 days. The child can't wait. As she spoke, she turned to Han Yunxi. Esteemed Wang Fei, Medical City is heartless. We're willing to go through thick and thin with you, but the child can't bear this. Esteemed Wang Fei, I beg you to save the child. Please save the child. As soon as she finished speaking, all the women cried out in unison, Save the child, save the child. Their cries for help, mixed with the child's cries, resounded through the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate and the skies of South Ning City. Even the most heartless person would be moved. Han Yunxi's hands trembled. She wanted to comfort the crying child, but she couldn't move. She was well aware that these people had come at someone else's behest. Commoners wouldn't dare to cause a ruckus here. But everything before her eyes was the truth. Doctors shouldn't grant pleas. Han Yunxi panicked. Not only because of the scene before her, but also because she wasn't completely confident that she'd win even if she openly went against Medical City. She'd only admitted to being part of the poison sect, and openly went against Medical City, because she'd been forced into a corner. What if she lost? Amidst the crying, Han Yunxi had a second thought. She'd confess her crimes. She'd shoulder the poison sect's groundless crimes, and accept the Medical Academy's punishment instead. It had to be said that the scene before her eyes had truly shaken Han Yunxi. It was worth it to exchange her life for the millions of patients in the South Central region to seek medical treatment. Han Yunxi had never been one to compromise, but this time, she was powerless to resist her fate. Suddenly, a clear voice rang out from the side. The doctor is here. Pilfine Pharmacy has arranged for 10 doctors to specially treat the children and the elderly. There's no need to wait in a long line. Everyone hurry and go. The one leading the line is Tianning's former imperial physician, Huang Jingming. He guarantees that everyone will be cured of their illnesses and won't take a single copper. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice and saw Mu Ling standing there. She was dressed in a light yellow muslin dress that accentuated her liveliness. Beside her stood an old man who was none other than Gu Beiyue's close friend, Tianning's imperial physician Huang Jingming. The crowd had indeed come to make things difficult for Han Yunqi after receiving benefits, but it was also a fact that the child was sick. As soon as they heard the news, they all scrambled to get to Pilfine Pharmacy. Before long, the Duke of Qin's gates were empty. Mu Ling stared at Gu from a distance. She didn't rush over like before, but simply smiled at him. Her smile was especially silly and beautiful. Chapter 762. Gu had already begun to back away, but Mu Linger didn't cling to him like before. She simply smiled at him. Instead, it was Huang Gingchen who stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. Esteemed Wang Fei, Dr. Gu, long time no see. Old man brought 60 disciples with him this time. 10 of them stayed in South Ning, while the remaining 50 were sent to various places to treat the elderly and young. This can be considered the best of old man's meager efforts. Han Yunqi was so moved that she didn't know what to say. If she had to be asked how she felt, the only thing she could think of was that she didn't study medicine and didn't have a group of disciples. Gu Beiyue also cupped his hands in greeting. Elder Huang, this one has been waiting for you for a long time. Elder Huang smiled. Hee, old man helped you convince quite a few famous doctors. They'll be arriving with their disciples in the next few days, so don't worry. After Elder Huang finished speaking, he nodded at Han Yunqi before turning to head back to Pilfine Pharmacy. Han Yunqi's cold heart finally warmed up. She knew that there were still many good doctors in this world. After Huang Gingchen left, Mu Linger still didn't come over. She giggled and said, "Don't worry, leave Pilfine Pharmacy to me and Dr. Huang." After she finished speaking, she winked at Gu and left without saying another word. Gu was quite surprised and secretly sighed in relief. Pilfine Pharmacy was very busy and had many patients waiting for her to treat. Since she was a medical practitioner, she could still treat some minor illnesses. She didn't have time to waste here at a time like this. She thought that since she was clinging onto Qi Brother, and Qi Brother wouldn't like her, she should hurry back to Pilfine Pharmacy and fight against Medical City. She didn't like Medical City to begin with, so when she found out that Qi Brother was Gu Qi Sha, who had been banished by Medical City, she hated Medical City even more. After walking far away, she couldn't help but turn back and shout, "Qi Brother, take the poison corpses and destroy Medical City. Linger will always support you." Silly girl. Gu smiled helplessly. This girl supported Han Yunqi's refusal. Although Elder Huang had brought many doctors to help, their help was limited. "Dr. Gu, our chances of winning aren't high." Han Yunqi was telling the truth. Who knew that Gu Beiyue would say, "Esteemed Wang Fei, if you hand yourself over, you can save the innocent people for a while. But you can't save them forever. You don't need to feel guilty, and you can't waver. We must take this opportunity to change the rules of Medical City. That is the purest school, and has nothing to do with power." Han Yunqi did not expect that Gu Beiyue actually understood her. He could actually tell what she was thinking. His eyes weren't sharp at all, but gentle and soft. Still, they could see through everyone's hearts. "Gu Beiyue, you can treat illnesses, people, and the country, but you can also treat the heart?" Gu Beiyue continued. "Esteemed Wang Fei, our chances of winning are very high. The Apricot Woods Conference will be held in a few days, and this one will attend it." The Apricot Woods Conference was held once every 5 years. It was the highest meeting of Cloud Realm Continent's medical community, and a platform to compete in medical skills. Through this competition and display of medical results, a doctor's rank would be determined once again. Under normal circumstances, those below the 5th grade of Divine Doctor would have to be evaluated through a competition. There was a limit to the number of people allowed, As for the 4 grades of Divine Doctor, and Divine Doctor, they would be evaluated through the demonstration of their medical achievements. Once a doctor obtained a rank, they would receive many benefits from the medical academy. For example, they could study under high-ranked doctors, come into contact with medical skills that weren't taught to outsiders, or receive subsidies from the medical academy for their research. Even without these benefits, the mere title of a doctor was enough to make many people scramble like ducks. In Cloud Realm Continent, a doctor's rank was the proof of one's medical skills. It was the recognition of one's profession, and a glorious title. Han Yunqi had always known that Gu Beiyue's medical skills weren't just a 5th-ranked divine doctor. She also knew that Gu Beiyue had always disdained the different ranks of the medical academy, so he hadn't gone for one yet. Now that he was going to attend the Apricot Woods Conference, was he going to show off his true skills? Esteemed Wang Fei, this one is planning to challenge Academy head Gu Yuntian. I'm just afraid that esteemed Wang Fei won't trust me. Gu Beiyue actually smiled at such a serious topic. Han Yunqi's heart pounded in her chest. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't looking forward to it. Although she didn't know where Gu Beiyue got his confidence from, she knew that his words were definitely reliable. I trust you, Han Yunqi said with certainty. The reason why Medical City had such a high appeal in the medical field was that the medical school represented the highest level of medical skills and abundant medical resources. If Gu Beiyue challenged Gu Yuntian's authority, and if Gu Beiyue expressed his willingness to take him in as a disciple, what would the result be? Even if they couldn't shake the medical academy, they could at least fight for more doctors. Han Yunqi finally saw hope. Gu chuckled. Gu Beiyue, I never expected you to have designs on the Apricot Woods Conference as well. This old man has my eyes on it as well. As long as you get rid of that old thing Gu Yuntian, this old man promises that the position of head of the medical academy will be yours. Gu, you have something on Gu Yuntian, don't you? Han Yunqi asked anxiously. Gu was the head elder's adopted son, and very familiar with the poison sect. She guessed that Gu must know something, or else he wouldn't be so arrogant. Gu turned back with a flirtatious smile. It's a secret. Han Yunqi had no idea of Gu's relationship with the medical academy, nor did she know how much suffering Gu had suffered there. She couldn't help but laugh when she saw his flirtatious smile. Gu, tell me the truth. Are you from the poison sect? Gu was very agitated. Han Yunqi, this old man won't be your relative. It doesn't matter if you're not from the poison sect. You'll still be my relative when you marry Linger one day, Han Yunqi said seriously. Gu's mouth twitched as he pretended not to hear. Han Yunqi knew exactly what Gu was thinking, but what else could she do besides turn him down with a joke like this? When discussing matters with this guy, she always had to be half joking. If she spoke too seriously, he would always refute her on the spot and snort disdainfully, refusing to take it to heart. There's an important matter. Let's go inside and talk. Gu Beiyue cut short their banter. Han Yunqi knew that there was another big problem besides withdrawing. Ningcheng. When they returned to the room, General Bailey had already arrived from the back door. The redcoat cannons had forced the Tian'an's Mu family troops to retreat. Ningcheng hadn't pursued the Tian'an's position in the 3 western cities, but had immediately withdrawn his troops. The Tian'an troops had suffered heavy casualties, so Ningcheng had only left behind a third of his artillery and 2 border garrisons. Half of the remaining troops had been sent to the Western Front to deal with the Chu clan troops, while the other half was heading south to prepare for the attack on the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's manor. General Bailey explained the situation on Ningcheng's side, then said, even if Northernly manages to find war horses today, it'll take at least a month or 2 before they can be used. This general is planning to send troops north on the day of the Apricot Woods Conference. The land and navy will work together to divide Ningcheng's forces. Water army? Han Yunqi was doubtful. Yes, there's a large river in Tianning called the Sand River. It flows from western Zhou in the west to the Eastern Sea in the east. If Tianning's troops want to go south, they'll have to cross this river. As long as we buy enough time to take Tianning's Helen Prefecture, we'll be able to control the river. Once we control it, It won't be so easy for Tianning's troops to go south. We can drag things out until Northernly sends out their troops, General Bailey said seriously. Han Yunqi immediately understood. This was called gaining the initiative by striking first. If they were destined to fight Ningcheng, then it was better to wait until Ningcheng dealt with Western Zhou before sending out their troops. They could even use Western Zhou to divide Ningcheng's forces. Moreover, if they sent out their troops now, it would definitely catch Ningcheng off guard. The first battle would catch Ningcheng unawares. After all, Long Feiyi was still on Celestial Mountain. Everyone assumed that they'd wait for him to make a move after he left the mountain. Medical City had Gu Beiwei and Gu's help, so there was still hope. Ningcheng had General Bailey keeping him in check. No matter what, Han Yunqi thought, they could at least stabilize the situation, and buy time for Long Feiyi. Han Yunqi had no idea that Gu Beiwei's decision to attend the Apricot Woods conference at Medical City and General Bailey's preemptive strike were all because of Long Feiyi's orders. That man might be far away on Celestial Mountain, but he still had control over everything. Han Yunqi discussed a few more details with everyone before realizing that it was already late at night. Everyone was still hungry. Zhao Mama, have the kitchens prepare some food, Han Yunqi instructed. General Bailey didn't stay for dinner and took his leave to attend to military affairs. Gu wouldn't leave. He'd forgotten how long it had been since he'd eaten at the same table as Poison Lass. He found several jugs of fine wine and said, "The last time the three of us ate at the same table was several years ago. Even now Long Fei has sealed up my restaurant. Dr. Gu just recovered from his injuries, so he can't drink. Mingxiang and I don't know how to drink, so you can drink by yourself," Han Yunqi said seriously. Gu rolled his eyes at her. "Spoil sport." Han Yunqi ignored him and asked Gu Beiwei seriously, "Tomorrow, we'll make some preparations and tell them everything we need to tell them. The night after tomorrow, we'll leave secretly. How about it?" Gu Beiwei nodded. He hesitated for a while before saying, "Esteemed Wang Fei, this humble one has been communicating with His Highness the Duke of Qin these past few days, and learned that His Highness is seriously injured. This humble one has a set of acupuncture techniques that are extremely effective in treating internal injuries." Really? Han Yunqi was overjoyed. Gu Beiwei's acupuncture techniques were definitely top-notch. Amen. Gu Beiwei was still hesitant, but he still said, "Esteemed Wang Fei, this humble one can't personally go to Celestial Mountain to perform acupuncture for His Highness the Duke of Qin. Why don't you teach it to someone you trust and have them do it for you?" Han Yunqi couldn't wait for Long Feiyi's injuries to recover quickly. Every day counted. "Sure." She immediately agreed. Gu Beiwei was about to say Bailey Mingxiang when Han Yunqi pulled Bailey Mingxiang over. "Let's have Mingxiang. She learns quickly, so 2 days shouldn't be a problem." Bailey Mingxiang was very surprised. She couldn't believe her ears. Her heart pounded wildly. If esteemed Wang Fei hadn't held her hand tightly, her hands would have been trembling. Heavens! She actually wanted to go to Celestial Mountain to perform acupuncture for His Highness the Duke of Qin? She reflexively looked to the right. Although Su Xiaoyu wasn't there, she seemed to see Su Xiaoyu standing there. Those bright eyes were filled with hostility and suspicion as they stared at her. Chapter 763. Su Xiaoyu wasn't here, so the cold eyes that were examining Bailey Mingxiang were her own. How could she not know that this was an opportunity that could only be encountered by chance? Even if she couldn't treat His Highness Duke of Qin, she would be satisfied to be able to serve him. Or rather, even if she didn't serve him, as long as she could watch him from afar, she would die without regrets. But she couldn't. She wasn't willing to let her greed stain the purest faith in her heart, the purest unrequited love. She looked at Gu Beiwei and discovered that Gu Beiwei was also looking at her. "Gu Beiwei, do you understand? Do you really understand?" A child's intuition was the most accurate, and a child's eyes were the sharpest. That was why Su Xiaoyu had seen through him. But what about Gu Beiwei? If she couldn't hide it from him, if they were truly in the same boat, why didn't he understand? Why did he still want to send her to Celestial Mountain? That shouldn't be the case. Actually, this was a form of harm. Bailey Mingxiang took a step forward and bowed. Esteemed Wangfei Imperial Physician Gu, Mingxiang is untalented. I'm afraid I won't be able to learn acupuncture techniques. So I ask that the two of you find someone else to entrust this heavy responsibility to. She refused. Before Han Yunxi could speak, Gu Beiwa said, "No matter. This one guarantees that I can teach you in 2 days. This one has already discussed this with His Highness Duke of Qin. You're the most suitable candidate." Bailey Mingxiang was stunned. This was actually His Highness Duke of Qin's intention? Han Yunxi was also surprised. "You've already discussed this?" His Highness Duke of Qin originally wanted esteemed Wangfei to return to Celestial Mountain, but unfortunately, I'm afraid that esteemed Wangfei will have to follow us to Medical City, Gu Beiwa said seriously. If someone else had said this, Han Yunxi might have hesitated, but she had never doubted Gu Beiwa's words. Esteemed Wangfei, Miss Mingxiang is truly the most suitable candidate, Gu Beiwa added. Han Yunxi immediately thought of Bailey Mingxiang, because she was the most suitable candidate. Firstly, Bailey Mingxiang had learned a lot of acupuncture techniques from Gu Beiwa. She was talented and had a good foundation. Secondly, the most important thing was that she was Long Fei Ye's confidant. If there was a traitor, who else would he look for other than the Bailey clan? The people of the 100 Lane clan were the least likely to betray Long Fei Yi. And Long Fei Yi was seriously injured at the moment, so they couldn't afford to make even the slightest mistake. Moreover, they couldn't afford to leak any information. If Han Yunxi wanted to find someone who could quickly learn the needle techniques and be absolutely loyal to Long Fei, she wouldn't be able to find anyone. Of course, Mu Linger was also a candidate, but Mu Linger still had to manage Pilfine Pharmacy. Moreover, that girl was deathly afraid of Long Fei Yi and would never accept this task. They also didn't have the right to order her around. Mingxiang, you won't obey my orders, but are you going to defy His Highness' orders? Do you want me to invite your father over? Han Yunxi asked teasingly. Bailey Mingxiang had nothing to say. She was at a loss, and her heart was filled with apprehension and unease. She didn't say anything, so Gu Beiwa took it as her agreement. Miss Mingxiang, go back and rest early. Come to my place tomorrow morning to learn acupuncture. All right. Bailey Mingxiang turned to Han Yunxi and said, since esteemed Wangfei trusts me so much, Mingxiang definitely won't disappoint esteemed Wangfei. Han Yunxi nodded and muttered, he's really been seriously injured this time. I can only hope that he recovers quickly. Before Bailey Mingxiang left, she asked, esteemed Wangfei, is there any news of little Yu? Although she'd felt like someone was watching her every day when Su Xiaoyu was still around, she'd been mocked and ridiculed every now and then. But the girl had been missing for so long that the Duke of Qin's estate was so quiet that she wasn't used to it. Han Yunxi sighed softly. I'm still looking for her. Don't worry. Rest early and focus on your acupuncture lessons tomorrow. After Bailey Mingxiang left, only Gu Beiwa and Chu Shifeng were left in the room. Han Yunxi asked, Dr. Gu, where did you get this poison? Gu Beiwa took out a poison needle and said, it was an assassination. It didn't seem like they wanted to kill me, but lure esteemed Wangfei down the mountain. Han Yunxi immediately looked towards Chu Shifeng, who hastily reported, there are 2 possibilities. 1. An expert snuck in and avoided our defenses. 2. There might be spies among the people in the estate. Either way, this person must be in cahoots with the spies on Celestial Mountain. They knew His Highness Duke of Qin was heavily injured, and lured esteemed Wangfei down the mountain to incite discord in Carefree City against esteemed Wangfei. Chu Shifeng's words were exactly what Han Yunxi had guessed over the past few days. Could this person be the one who kidnapped Su Xiaoyu? Why did they kidnap little Yu? Han Yunxi didn't understand. Little Yu had been missing for a long time. If these people wanted to take her hostage for ransom, shouldn't they have made a move by now? Chu Shifeng didn't answer, but said seriously, esteemed Wangfei, the enemy is in the shadows while we're in the light. It's better to be cautious. His Highness must have a plan to deal with the spies. Medical City is more important right now. This subordinate will send more men to protect you all there. Gu, who had been silent all night, gave a soft snort at these words. Save it. Chu Shifeng wasn't convinced and glared at him. Before the two of them could start arguing, Gu Beiwa cut them off. Everyone, it's getting late. Let's all rest. Esteemed Wang Fei must be tired from the carriage ride, so hurry and go back. Han Yunxi really was tired. There was still a pile of things to do tomorrow. She and Gu Beiwa were both leaving, while General Bailey was preparing to send out troops. They had to make proper arrangements for the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate. They couldn't let the rear be emptied out while they fought on the front lines. Fortunately, General Bailey's sons were all capable. For the time being, they could still intimidate the 5 great clans with their military might. Han Yunxi didn't return to the leisurely Cloud Pavilion, but went to Long Feiye's quarters. Besides their wedding night, she'd never spent a night in his quarters. Tonight, she'd only come because she coveted the scent he'd left behind in the palace. She hoped that the familiar scent would give her a good night's sleep. Actually, she was long tired but not sleepy. After Granny Zhao lit the lamp, she asked Granny Zhao to leave. She wandered around the empty palace by herself. Everything in this quarters was the same as the one in Tianning's capital city. Han Yunxi wasn't sure if Long Feiyi was nostalgic and used to living here, or if he was too lazy to get used to his new quarters. When she'd married into the Duke of Qin's estate and been brought to his quarters, she'd done the same thing as now. But her feelings were completely different then. Back then she'd been fearful, cautious, and curious. Now she only felt longing. Perhaps it was because he hadn't lived here for too long, but she couldn't find any familiar scent. Even the luxurious silk quilt on the wide bed didn't give her any warmth to feel at ease. Han Yunxi curled up in the quilt by herself, unable to fall asleep no matter how hard she tried. She secretly laughed at herself for recognizing the bed. But how could she recognize the bed? Even in the carriage on horseback, and in his arms, she could still fall asleep. She clearly recognized the person. Since she wasn't sleepy at all, she decided not to sleep. Instead, she lay on her back and stared at the ceiling. Did Long Feiyi toss and turn like this when he slept here? Did he stare at the same ceiling? What did he look like when he was asleep? What kind of sleeping position was he used to? Did he sleep on his back, on his side, or on his stomach? Was he more used to sleeping on his left or right side? Han Yunxi wasn't sleepy at all, but her thoughts were running wild. She rolled to her right side to lie on her stomach, then rolled to her left side to lie on her back. If only he was here, how good would that be? After tossing and turning, Han Yunxi finally got off the bed. She really missed Long Feiyi. At night, people would become emotional. She came to the study and found that the chair behind the desk was facing the window. No one would dare to touch anything here. She was afraid that Long Feiyi sat with his back to the desk last time. She didn't understand why he was sitting with his back to the desk. Was there anything to see outside the window? She didn't think too much about it. She straightened the chair and sat down. She picked up the brush and wrote a letter. Thousands of thoughts, thousands of words, and surging longing all gathered at the tip of the brush. But only 6 words were left on the paper. It didn't have the talent and tactfulness of the ancients, but it was the most moving confession in the world. Long Feiyi, I miss you. She folded the letter neatly and put it in the envelope, signing the word she. She opened the window and wanted to summon an eagle to deliver the letter. However, the moment she opened the window behind her, she was stunned. Soon her eyes were filled with tears. Tears welled up in her eyes and almost fell. Looking at the scene in front of her, her past hardships, grievances, torment, and even her inferiority complex seemed to disappear. For the first time, she truly felt that her love wasn't humble at all. After staring blankly for a long time, Han Yunxi put the chair back to its original position. She sat down and looked out the window. She just happened to see the window of the leisurely Cloud Pavilion. Under the bright moon, even without the lights, the leisurely Cloud Pavilion was clearly visible. Countless nights, she stood there alone and stared blankly at the lights in his bedroom. She always admitted that she fell in love with that man first, but she didn't expect that he had always been watching over her in a corner that she couldn't see. Long Feiyi, you fool! Han Yunxi smiled bitterly. It was only now that she realized why he had built another Duke of Qin's manor, another sleeping palace, and another leisurely Cloud Pavilion, without moving a single blade of grass or tree. So it was all for this coincidental angle of view, this angle of view that she was unaware of. Long Fei Yi, you and I, who is more humble? Perhaps we are both humble, willing to lower our heads and condescend to each other. Han Yunqi opened the letter again and added, Long Fei Yi, you fool. Then she summoned an eagle to send the letter out. That night, she sat on the chair and stared at the window of the leisurely cloud pavilion. Unknowingly, she fell asleep. For countless nights, Long Fei Yi also leaned on the chair and stared at the beautiful figure in the leisurely cloud pavilion as he fell asleep. After Han Yunqi fell asleep, Lil Thing secretly slipped out of the poison storage space. Han Yunqi could vaguely sense it, but she didn't make a sound. She knew that Lil Thing hadn't returned to South Ning for a long time, so it must have gone to find Gu Beiyue. If not for the fact that Gu Beiyue didn't know how to cure poisons, she would have suspected that Gu Beiyue was also from the poison sect. Why did Lil Thing like him so much? However, Gu Beiyue was truly likable. His temperament was clean, and his personality was very gentle. Being with him didn't bring about any great joys or sorrows, but it was very comfortable. It was like basking in the sun on a winter day. Unknowingly, a lifetime passed. Chapter 764. Lil Thing had been seriously injured last time, but it wasn't as bad as the loss of its detoxification blood. Even though it was recuperating in the poison storage space, it could still sense Mama Yunqi's thoughts and hear what was said in the outside world. By the time Mama Yunqi returned to the Duke of Qin's estate, it had already woken up. That was because it had smelled the gentleman's scent, the purest scent in the world. Only the purest of souls had such a pure scent. Lil Thing was still a tiny thing, only the size of a palm. It was fluffy and snow-white like a little fur ball. Actually, it had wanted to come out long ago, but lacked the strength. It took a lot of effort to jump out of the poison pond and out of the poison storage space. After jumping out the window, it ran straight for the ancestral hall, through the window it was most familiar with. As expected, it saw the gentleman lying on his side on the bed. He was dressed in white undergarments and half covered by a silk quilt. His long hair was scattered behind his head and spread out on the pillow. Sleeping, he was even gentler and calmer than when he was awake. He lacked his usual strict modesty, and even exuded traces of laziness that Lil Thing had never seen before. It was impossible to imagine what a man like this would look like if he dropped all etiquette and assumed a lazy, casual posture. Gentlemen, just what kind of person are you? Lil Thing sat on the table and stared blankly at the gentleman's face. The more it looked, the more familiar it felt, as if it had seen him somewhere before. How could that be? Had it been the gentleman before? Had it forgotten? It really was forgetful, but the gentleman was only in his 20s. It couldn't have forgotten things from that time, right? Lil Thing carefully thought back and realized that it really wasn't remembering much. Perhaps it had been locked up for too long and only remembered that little black room. It was boring and dry, so there wasn't much to remember. In another 2 hours it would be daybreak. Lil Thing jumped onto the bed and snuggled up in the gentleman's arms before finding a comfortable spot to sleep. The Duke of Qin's estate was as quiet as the moon in the sky. Currently, Mu Linger was sitting by herself on the back steps of the Duke of Qin's estate. Chu Shifeng had bumped into her while patrolling the area. Originally, he wanted to tell her that Gu Qishao was sleeping soundly on a nearby rooftop, basking in the moonlight. But after some hesitation, Chu Shifeng decided not to stick his nose into other people's business. Chu Shifeng really disliked Gu. He felt that a good girl like Mu Ling shouldn't be wasted on a scum like Gu. For some reason, he suddenly thought of young Master Tang. Even though Tang Li was now the head of the Tang clan, Chu Shifeng was still used to calling him young Master Tang. He remembered that young Master Tang had once been very interested in the genius pharmacist of Medicine City's Mu family. How did he end up in the hands of that slut, Ning Jing? He wondered if young Master Tang had taken down Ning Jing. The war was about to begin, and the arms trade was very important to them. Mu Linger was lying on her knees half asleep. In fact, she was already exhausted. She busied herself until the wee hours of the night, before she finished seeing all the patients and taking stock of all the medicinal ingredients. She was supposed to be sleeping in her bedroom in the back courtyard of Pilfiend Pharmacy, but she ran all the way to the Duke of Chen's estate without even taking a sip of water. When she reached the entrance and saw the tightly shut back door, she suddenly realized that it was late at night. Everyone had dispersed and gone to bed, so she wouldn't be able to see Chi brother anymore. She didn't know why she was sitting here either. So what if she had to wait until daybreak? She might as well go back to Pilfiend Pharmacy and keep busy. However, she just sat down. Once she sat down, she did not think about it anymore. Perhaps, she still had a little bit of hope in her heart. She hoped that Chi Gij would enter through this door. Chi brother often appeared and disappeared like a ghost too. He ran around in the middle of the night, didn't he? Chi brother, last time you left, you didn't even say goodbye to Ling. Now that you're back, aren't you going to see her? Although Ling isn't anyone to you, she's still a friend you've known since you were young. Chi brother, just what do you take Ling for? That night Mu Ling didn't see Gu. When the sun rose, she didn't slack off. She stretched lazily and returned to Pilfiend Pharmacy to begin her busy day. She didn't even notice that her knees were wet. When the first ray of sunlight shone into the study and hit Han Yunqi's face, Han Yunqi immediately woke up. The sunlight dispelled the darkness and coolness of the sleeping quarters. Han Yunqi checked her poison storage space and confirmed that Lil Thing wasn't there. Her schedule today was packed. She had to go to Pilfiend Pharmacy, the Bailey Army's headquarters, and the Commander-in-Chief's manor. There was a pile of work waiting for her to deal with in each place. But just to be on the safe side, she decided to go to Gu Beiyue's place to see if Lil Thing was there. As soon as she entered, she saw Gu Beiyue talking to Lil Thing. Gu Beiyue spoke very softly. She didn't know if Lil Thing understood him, but it nodded repeatedly in response. The man and the squirrel didn't seem out of place at all. In fact, there was an indescribable harmony between them. Sure enough, it's with you. Han Yunqi smiled. It snuck over last night. I only found out this morning. Gu Beiyue smiled. He held Lil Thing in his arms and gently stroked it. This little guy might be fated to be with me. It likes to stick to me. Isn't that so? It's still injured. Instead of being obedient and recuperating, it only knows how to run over to your place to play. Although Han Yunqi's tone was reproachful, her heart ached for Lil Thing. The scene from Celestial Mountain would occasionally appear in her mind. She couldn't imagine if she would still be alive if it weren't for Lil Thing. She knew Lil Thing was good at jumping and running, but never expected it to transform into a big white wolf with such explosive strength. She took Lil Thing from Gu Beiyue's arms and gently stroked it. Lil Thing rubbed itself against her hand intimately. You've never seen it transform, right? Han Yunqi grinned. It's a big white wolf. You might be frightened. Lil Thing seemed a little dissatisfied as it lazily glared at Han Yunqi. Unfortunately, Han Yunqi didn't see it. Mama Yunqi, please don't ruin my image in front of the gentleman like this, alright? Gu Beiyue wasn't surprised or alarmed. Instead, he smiled faintly. It's a snow wolf. Its fur is as white as snow, pure and holy. Esteemed Wang Fei, since you're a descendant of the poison sect, the poison beast will protect you with its life. It'll live and die with you. Snow wolf, that's right. Han Yunqi nodded. She picked up Lil Thing and intimately pressed her face against it. Lil Thing patted her lightly with its meaty paws, amusing Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi grinned. Dr. Gu, since Lil Thing likes you so much, I'll give it to you when it recovers so it can protect you. How does that sound? Gu Beiyue was a doctor without the strength to truss a chicken. He really needed protection. Lil Thing's eyes immediately lit up as Gu Beiyue chuckled. I like it too. I can borrow it to relieve my boredom from time to time, but I'm afraid I can't afford to have it as a gift. Lil Thing didn't hear the rest of his words. It only heard the gentleman say, I like it too. Sir, you know Lil Thing likes you and you like Lil Thing too. But why can't we be together? Just as they were talking, a servant came to report that Bailey Mingxiang had arrived. Han Yunqi didn't want to delay Gu Beiyue's teaching of acupuncture, so she handed Lil Thing to Gu Beiyue and left after greeting Bailey Mingxiang. Long Feiyi received Han Yunqi's letter, as well as Gu Beiyue's. No matter how important Gu Beiyue's letter was, he still opened Han Yunqi's first. However, He didn't expect there to only be 2 sentences in the letter. Long Fei Yi, I miss you. And Long Fei Yi, you fool. He rubbed his brows with one hand while holding the letter with the other. After reading it for a long time, the joy in his heart transformed into a soundless smile. The ink in his study was an extremely precious Jianshan ink. It had a unique fragrance, so he knew she'd gone to his study. He was so engrossed in his reading that he hastily put away the letter when the old man from Kinzo scooted over. In the end, his joy was replaced by seriousness. Long Fei picked up his brush and wrote a few words on the back of the paper. Looks like it's no big deal, the old man from Kinzo teased. Long Fei Yi ignored him and waited for the ink to dry before carefully folding the letter and placing it back in the envelope. Seeing this, the old man from Kinzo didn't understand. Fei, this you're not mailing it out? No need, Long Fei Yi replied mildly. What did you write when you replied but didn't mail it out? The old man from Kinzo was curious as well. Perhaps only his disciple would be. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi automatically ignored the old man from Kinzo's question. He put the letter away before opening Gu Beiyue's letter. Gu Beiyue had explained the situation at the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate very clearly. He also mentioned that once everything was settled, Bailey Mingxiang would come to Celestial Mountain. This time, the old man from Kinzo scooted over again. Long Fei Yi didn't avoid him, but handed the letter to the old man from Kinzo. Bailey Mingxiang? The old man from Kinzo hesitated before asking, can this woman be trusted? She's a member of the mermaid clan. Of course she can be trusted. Don't worry, Long Fei Yi said. Treat her injuries with acupuncture? That girl believes such things? The old man from Kinzo was amused. He always thought Han Yunxi was very intelligent. She's often stupid. Long Fei Yi's tone was doting as he spoke. After a while he sighed softly. She's never doubted Gu Beiyue's words. I'm just afraid that she'll be so stupid that she won't believe you, the old man from Kinzo intoned. Actually, Long Fei Yi hadn't told the old man from Kinzo that Han Yunxi was a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan. Right now, even Chu Shifeng and Tang Li were in the dark. After Mute Granny's death, he was the only one who knew the truth. That was the most difficult thing for him to control. Long Fei Yi didn't reply. Seeing the seriousness in his eyes, the old man from Kinzo didn't ask any questions. He quickly went to invite the honored elders to treat Long Fei Yi's injuries. When he said that it'd take a year and a half to recover with internal energy, it was all for the sake of the spy. With the help of the honored elders and his own foundation, Long Fei Yi's injuries would heal in a month at most. Actually, he'd woken up during the 5 days that the honored elders had treated him. He knew that Han Yunxi was waiting bitterly by the door, but he'd steeled his heart and refused to see her. If Han Yunxi hadn't been heartbroken, how could the spy have believed that he was seriously injured? The ambush from the Duke of Qin's estate, the spy from Celestial Mountain, the person who instigated Heelian, the person who knew he possessed the lustbite energy, and the mastermind behind the scenes trying to control everything. He'd long had his eyes on him. Chapter 765. After the honored sir helped Long Fei Yi heal his injuries, his complexion looked much better. He should have gone outside to get some fresh air, but now he had to stay in bed. There were many servants selected from the Sky Mountain disciples in Jiushuan Palace. Most of them were chosen to be servants when they were around 10 years old. Kinzo would teach them swordsmanship, but he would only teach them a little, and not really teach them anything. Although he knew there was a spy, Long Fei Yi did not investigate. Firstly, he was afraid of alerting the enemy. Secondly, there was no need to. Thirdly, he wanted to beat them at their own game. Heelian was an excellent example. Someone raised by that old fox behind the scenes would not betray his master so easily. Long Fei hadn't done a thing, but he'd already arranged everything in silence. His methods were always capable of catching people off guard. At this time, he was lazily leaning on the bamboo bed with his hand over his heart. The letter from before seemed to be hidden there. Kinzo was afraid he would be bored, so he came to accompany him. In fact, Long Fei Yi was a very boring person. If there was no need to talk, he could go for days without saying a word. Kinzo had watched him grow up, and knew his personality very well. In fact, Kinzo was the one who was bored and came to find Long Fei to relieve his boredom. Some people could not be bored. If they were bored for too long, their heart would get sick. Gu Beiwei was about to take out Han Yunqi's letter when Kinzo came in. He moved his hand away and pretended to be asleep. Kinzo was already sitting in front of him, but he still did not move. Kinzo coughed a few times and said, "There is still no news about the medicine you asked for last time. However, old man recently received a medicinal pills." Before he could finish, Long Fei immediately opened his eyes. Last time, he asked Kinzo how to treat Duanmu Yao's internal injuries and mentioned Gu Beiyue's condition. Kinzo told him about a medicine called the dragon pill returning. Unfortunately, he still couldn't find it. "What about medicinal pills?" Long Fei asked seriously. Weren't you asleep?" This Gu Beiyue. The Kinzo man's expression turned ambiguous. "It's a good thing he's not a girl. Otherwise, if you weren't so nervous, that last Yunqi would definitely get mad at you." Faced with such a question, Long Fei only shot the sword sect master a disdainful glance. What else could he do? After mocking the old Kinzo, he lay back down and continued to sleep. "Your wings are getting harder and harder." Kinzo chuckled. "I just received a medicinal pills called Phoenix Perch. Give them to that Sir Gu first, and let him recover on his own. It shouldn't be a problem for him to recover 20 to 30% of his martial arts in a short period of time." Long Fei's eyes lit up at these words. He immediately rose to his feet and said, "All right, I'll write a letter right away." Kinzo man saw him in such a hurry and couldn't help but remind him, "Fei, you should think this through clearly. Once this person recovers, his martial arts might even surpass yours and mine. It's hard to know what's in a person's heart. Moreover, this person is Western Qin's most loyal servant. You and him are like fire and water." Long Fei had already finished writing the letter. As was his habit, it was short and concise, but he raised his head to look at the sword sect master, and seemed to hesitate as well. "Think it over some more," Kinzo man coaxed. Long Fei thought it over for a long time before finally reaching out his hand. Although he didn't say a word, Kinzo man understood his intentions and could only hand over the medicinal pills. After delivering the letter, Kinzo man's expression was especially solemn. Long Fei, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had happened. He found the shadow guard and asked him about Tang Li's situation. "Your Highness, the Tang clan head says you don't have to worry. He'll definitely take over the arms trade within a year," the shadow guard reported. Long Fei grew angry. This prince has asked him 5 times, and he's given the same reply every time. What does he mean? There's a rumor going around that the Tang clan is going to supply the Ning clan's arms trade. What's going on? The shadow guard passed on Long Fei's words back to the Tang clan. A few days later, Long Fei received a 20-page letter that detailed Tang Li's entire honeymoon journey. It detailed how he'd coaxed Ning Jing to be happy, how he'd created romantic feelings to move her, how he'd created misunderstandings to make her jealous, and how he'd loosened the reins only to grasp them better. At the end of the letter, Tang Li added that if Long Fei couldn't handle Han Yunqi, he could ask him for advice at any time. He promised that he would be able to tame Han Yunqi within a year, and he would even be able to carry her in his arms. Long Fei's expression when he read the letter was simply unimaginable. At this time, Tang Li was lying on the tatami in Madame Tang's courtyard, rolling on the ground with laughter. "Ha ha ha. Mother, do you think my brother will rush down from Tianshan Mountain and kill me?" Madame Tang was overjoyed. No, he'll rush down the mountain and castrate you." Tang Li looked up with a hurt expression. "Are you really my mother? Will Ning Jing really come over later?" Madame Tang asked. "She'll definitely come over." Tang Li was very confident. The Ning clan still hasn't discovered that the Pearflower Storm needles have been destroyed. Madame Tang had been puzzled by this matter. They probably don't know how to use it. Haha, let them slowly figure it out. Tang Li chuckled. Shh. Madame Tang heard the secret signal from the maidservant and became alert. She's coming quickly. Today, Tang Li and Madame Tang were going to play the trick of injuring themselves to gain Ning Jing's confidence. After Tang Li and Ning Jing, returned to the Tang sect after their honeymoon, their lives returned to normal. After Tang Li inherited the position of clan master, he began to take charge of the manufacturing and design of various levels of hidden weapons. Ning Jing remotely controlled the management of several major industries in her hands through letters, the largest of which was the arms trade. The two of them did their own things. When they were together, it was always Tang Li who started the fight. And in the end, it was Tang Li who made her happy in all kinds of ways. Several times, no matter how Tang Li coaxed Ning Jing, she didn't smile. Tang Li made an exception and took her to visit the Tang sect's secret hidden weapons manufacturing factory. In short, Tang Li was the epitome of a wife-slave. Almost everyone in the Tang sect said that Tang Li was the man who doted on his wife the most. Hearing this, Ning Jing didn't know what to think. Perhaps she really believed that Tang Li had fallen in love with her. A few days ago, she had pretended to be in a bad mood and refused to answer Tang Li's questions. In the end, Tang Li grew angry, so she told him that business at the arms trade had been terrible recently, because they hadn't released any new weapons in a long time. Their competitors had snatched up a few big orders. Tang Li considerately told her, "Jing, what are you afraid of? I'm here. The Tang clan has a few types of hidden weapons that are perfect for the battlefield. I can just supply them to you for free. Once you spread the news, I guarantee you'll get back all your lost business." The next day after Tang Li's boastful words, Ning Jing really did spread the news, sending all of Cloud Realm continent into an uproar. After all, anyone who could use the Tang clan's hidden weapons as weapons would double the strength of their armies. Ning Jing was probably the happiest person to hear the news. That was because no matter how Ning Jing sold her weapons, they'd all end up in his hands. After Ning Jing spread the news, she immediately went to find Tang Li to ask him for details on the types and quantities of hidden weapons. But Tang Li only hemmed and hawed. Ning Jing immediately grew unhappy. If her previous unhappiness had all been an act to make things difficult for Tang Li, then she couldn't tell whether she was truly angry or faking it this time. This morning, she'd asked Tang Li again, but Tang Li had vowed to give her an answer by the afternoon. But by the time the sun was about to set, Tang Li was nowhere to be seen. Ning Jing couldn't find him anywhere, and had no choice but to come to Lady Tang's courtyard. Lady Tang's place was the last place in the Tang clan she wanted to visit. Hearing the footsteps outside, Tang Li immediately tossed a rattan whip to Lady Tang. "Mother, don't use too much force." "It's fine." Tang Li had promised Ning Jing something so important, so he naturally had to use the trick of injuring himself to gain her confidence. Although Lady Tang agreed to play along with her son's act, she couldn't bring herself to do it with the whip in her hand. "Son, why don't we just hit her a few times? Do you think Ning Jing's blind? Do you think she'll believe us if we don't hit her hard enough?" Tang Li said seriously, "Mother, if you can't steal your heart, then I won't be the clan head if I can't get her arms trade within a year. Then go find your father. Have him hit you." Lady Tang grew anxious. "She'll only believe you if you hit her." As Tang Li spoke, he snatched the rattan whip and swiftly whipped himself a few times. Every time he whipped himself, his skin and flesh were lacerated. It was a ghastly sight. Actually, Tang Li was a martial artist, so these few whips didn't carry much force. At most, they were just superficial wounds so he could bear it. After whipping his legs, he harshly whipped his back a few times, causing his body to bleed. Finally, he handed the rattan whip to Lady Tang. At this time, Lady Tang's eyes were already filled with tears, but Tang Li was still smiling. "Mother, she's almost here. Hurry up, don't mess it up for me. I'll definitely take care of that little bitch." Lady Tang looked at her son's bruised body and saw the bright and excited smile on his face. Suddenly, a sense of uneasiness flashed through her heart. The radiance in her son's eyes at this moment was too similar to his father's when he was young. That was the kind of radiance that would only appear when you liked someone. Lady Tang hoped that this was just her imagination. She gripped the rattan whip and quickly got into the mood. While crying, she reprimanded Tang Li. "You unfilial son. Wastrel, it's all my fault. It's all my fault for spoiling you too much. That's why you've become like this." "Tang Li, oh Tang Li, Do you know that the Tang sect's hidden weapons are not to be sold to outsiders? It's a rule passed down by our ancestors. It's the foundation of our Tang sect's seclusion. Do you know how much trouble the Tang sect will face in the future if you do something bad? I'm telling you, there's no way. There's no way this is happening. Ningjing stood at the door with her arms crossed and silently listened. Her penetrating eyes were sizing up Tang Li's injuries. Mother, I'll definitely do what I promised Ningjing. Today, even if you beat me to death, I won't change my mind. I'm the Tang sect's leader, not father. Tang Li said angrily. As soon as he finished speaking, Lady Tang viciously lashed out with the whip. His skin really split open. Unfilial son. You unfilial son. Even if I beat you to death today, I won't allow you to break the rules of our ancestors. As Lady Tang spoke, she lashed out with the whip again. Who knew that Ningjing would actually not move? Lady Tang's heart was bleeding, but she had no choice but to continue. Would Ningjing stop her? Chapter 766. Mrs. Tang was waiting for Ningjing to stop her. However, after she whipped Tang Li for the third time, Ningjing was still standing there. Mrs. Tang glanced over and saw Ningjing's amused expression. It was as if she was enjoying watching Tang Li get beaten up. How could she tolerate this? This woman's heart was simply made of stone. Tang Li's efforts over the past few days were all for naught. Ningjing, how dare you come here? Mrs. Tang pretended that she had just noticed her. She suddenly rushed over and lashed out with the vine whip. Ningjing almost didn't dodge. She was scared out of her wits. It's all your fault, you bitch. You seduced my son first. The Tang sect gave you face and married you officially. What else do you want? You don't want to mess with the Tang sect, do you? Mrs. Tang was both acting and serious. She lashed out with the whip again, but Ningjing dodged it again. A crafty look flickered past her eyes. Instead of running outside, she ran into the room and hid by Tang Li's side. This Mrs. Tang and Tang Li both cursed in their hearts. Mrs. Tang turned back and had to continue acting. Tang Li, get out of the way. I'll teach this little vixen a lesson today. Otherwise, she'll forget that the Tang sect's surname is Tang, not Ning. No. Tang Li was very brave. Are you going to move or not? Mrs. Tang asked again. No. Even if you beat me to death, I won't move. Tang Li said loudly. Ningjing hid behind him and clutched his clothes tightly. I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to move or not? Mrs. Tang was waiting for her son to think of a way to get out of this situation. Tang Li couldn't compromise. He was waiting for Mrs. Tang to find a way out herself. In the end, after Mrs. Tang whipped Tang Li 3 times, she pretended to have a heart attack and threw away the vine whip. She supported herself with one hand on the table and the other on her chest. She was out of breath and couldn't speak. Mother, what's wrong? Someone come. Tang Li shouted. The maidservants immediately rushed over. The maidservants in Lady Tang's courtyard were all clever people. They were used to seeing Lady Tang pretend to be ill, so they all looked flustered. They quickly carried Lady Tang to the inner room, but did not call for a doctor. Jinger, don't be afraid. You go back first. I want to see my mother, Tang Li said seriously. Unexpectedly, Ningjing was not concerned about his injury or Mrs. Tang's illness. She asked, what about the hidden weapons? At this moment, Tang Li almost vomited blood. However, he still endured it. He didn't believe that his strategy of spoiling his wife wouldn't work. It's fine, don't worry. I'll definitely do what I promised you. Tang Li answered seriously. Then I'm relieved. Ningjing smiled happily. She was obviously doing it on purpose. When she left Madame Tang's courtyard, she smiled even more happily. Tang Li wanted to trick her with his little tricks. He must be dreaming. At night, when Tang Li returned to his room, Ningjing was already lying on her side. She was sleeping with her back to the outside. Tang Li's wounds were not treated, and he looked like he had just returned from Madame Tang's place. He stuck his head out to look at Ningjing, and saw that she was really asleep. A self-deprecating smile appeared on his face. He clearly knew that it was all an act, and they were competing to see who would be conquered first. However, when he saw Ningjing sleeping so soundly, His heart still felt cold. He didn't wake Ningjing up. He took off his outer clothes and went to the backyard to wash up. A large basin of cold water poured down from the top of his head. The coldness penetrated his heart, causing the wounds all over his body to hurt. It also cleared up his somewhat groggy mind. Tangli, do you want to die? Suddenly, Ningjing's voice came from behind him. Tangli looked back and saw Ningjing standing on the steps in a thin nightgown. Her hair was casually scattered, and her dainty little face was a little drowsy. Even after she got married, she insisted on wearing men's clothes. Even he could only see her in women's clothes when they were in bed. If he ignored what she said just now, he could really think of her as a weak woman who could not stand the wind. She was delicate, and people could not help but want to protect her. However, this woman was not someone that ordinary men could protect. Tangli quickly came back to his senses. He chuckled and said, "Did I wake you up?" "Yes," Ningjing said angrily. "It's the middle of the night. If you want to wash up, can't you go somewhere else?" Tangli's temper was unimaginably good. He still chuckled. "Hurry up and go back to sleep. Be careful not to catch a cold. I'll change to another place." He was really about to leave, but Ningjing said angrily, "Come back. You woke me up and I can't sleep." Tangli obediently came back. "Then I'll talk to you." Ningjing rolled her eyes at him. She took his hand and went into the house. She was not gentle at all. She was very violent. She pressed him into a chair and then took a towel to wipe his body. When she touched his wounds, she was still careful. She took out the best ointment she had hidden and carefully applied the ointment on Tangli. Other than the pleasure in bed, this was the first time that Tangli saw this woman's gentle side. Soon the wounds on his upper body were treated. Tangli looked at his wet pants and snickered maliciously. "Take it off. Hurry up." Ningjing frowned and looked unhappy. She did not know if it was because she was woken up or because Tangli's wounds had not been treated. Tangli quickly took off his clothes and was only left with a pair of shorts. Ningjing squatted down and applied the ointment on him. He did not know if it was just Tangli's imagination. When Ningjing squatted down, he seemed to have heard her sigh. "Ningjing, is there anything in this world that can make you sigh with a heart of stone?" After treating the whip wounds on his legs, Ningjing threw the ointment on the table and warned him coldly, "If you wake me up again, you'll have to bear the consequences." She curled up on the bed again, leaving Tangli sitting alone at the side. He was only wearing a pair of shorts. Tangli's cold heart seemed to have warmed up. He quickly lay down beside Ningjing. At first, he was very careful, but later on he became restless. He first leaned toward her, and then wrapped his big hand around her waist. "Tangli," Ningjing warned in a low voice. Tangli turned a deaf ear to her. His big hand moved restlessly as he murmured, "Jingjing, Jingjing." In the silent night, the familiar embrace and the murmur of a lover were no longer important. What was real, what was fake, who was acting, who was watching the show, and who was immersed in the show. The candlelight was extinguished and the gauze curtain fell. Their minds were in a mess. When their passion reached its peak, he heard Ningjing's gentle voice. "Ali, your wounds." Tangli covered her mouth. "If a virgin dies under a chrysanthemum, I'll still be a romantic ghost." He always remembered that the little chrysanthemum was her favorite flower. While Tangli was immersed in his tenderness, Han Yunqi, who was far away in Pilfine Pharmacy, was worried about him before she left for Medical City. Even if he's tricking Ningjing, news like this will still cause trouble for the Tang clan, Han Yunqi said seriously. Tangli had agreed to cooperate with Ningjing's arms trade to sell assassination weapons. This was a signal to outsiders that the Tang clan's rules weren't so strict. Young clan head Tang, "I more haste, less speed." Chu Shifeng was extremely worried as well. He secretly hoped that the Tang clan wouldn't fall into chaos before His Highness Duke of Qin made his move. Gu Beiwei wasn't familiar with such matters, so he didn't say much. He simply handed over a few prescriptions to Mu Ling, and Imperial Physician Huang. "These are my additions, you can refer to them for reference." After making arrangements for Pilfine Pharmacy, Gu Beiwei wrote down a few more prescriptions for preventing epidemics. He suggested that Mu Ling, find someone to make the medicine, and divide it into bags, before having the various prefectures, towns and villages distributed to each household. Han Yunqi couldn't help but admire Gu Beiyue's thoughtfulness. Given the lack of doctors in the south-central regions, and the increasing number of patients, it was easy for a large-scale epidemic to break out. Little E looked over the prescriptions as he asked Gu Beiyue a few questions. Gu Beiyue patiently explained everything while Lady Helian sat on one side and watched. She seemed to be lost in thought for a moment. Seventh Madam, Little E seems to have grown taller recently, Han Yunqi said with a grin. Lady Helian didn't react at all. Mother, my big sister's asking you a question. I've grown taller, Little Ear exclaimed. Only then did Lady Helian snap out of her daze. Yes, you've grown taller. Seventh Madam, you must be tired. Go back and rest early. We'll have to trouble you and Little Ear to come over and help us while we're away, Han Yunqi said. Lady Helian glanced at her. You're treating me like an outsider. Han Yunqi finally had the time to chat with Lady Helian and Little E after she was done with her work. However, she had no choice but to leave before long. If she stayed any longer, the sun would have risen. Bailey Mingxiang had already left in secret. Han Yunqi and Gu Beiyue didn't return to the Duke of Qin's residence, but left Pilfine Pharmacy directly. As for Gu, not a trace of him was seen the entire night. Mu Ling Imperial Physician Huang, and Lady Helian sent them off. When the carriage was so far away that they couldn't see it anymore, Lady Helian asked, "Oh right, where are they going? Why did I forget to ask?" "To save someone," Mu Linger answered. Imperial Physician Huang sneered inwardly, but didn't say anything. "Who are they saving?" Little Ear asked curiously. Mu Ling rubbed Little Ear's head. "Big sister doesn't know either. You can ask your big sister when she comes back, okay?" "Okay." Little Ear was obedient. The next morning, Mu Ling didn't show up at Pilfine Pharmacy. She had the shadow guard take her to Han Yunqi and the others. As expected, she saw Gu. "Ay, alas, so you're coming with us?" Gu Qishao grinned heartlessly. He knew Mu Linger couldn't leave, but he didn't care. Mu Ling took out a bottle of medicine from her sleeve and handed it to him. "Here. I know you're going back to Medical City to settle accounts with those people. You have to be careful." Gu was shocked, then angrily turned to glare at Han Yunqi. As expected, Mu Ling already knew that he was Gu Qisha, the abandoned disciple of Medical City. Han Yunqi avoided Gu's gaze and urged her horse forward. "We'll wait for you up ahead." Gu Beiyue and the shadow guard immediately followed, leaving Gu and Mu Linger alone. Gu's anger towards Han Yunqi always came, and went as quickly as it came, as if it had never been much. He wasn't in Pilfine Pharmacy often anyway, so it didn't matter if this lass knew. He was already chuckling again and didn't ask Mu Ling about knowing his identity. He fiddled with the medicine bottle and asked, "Lass, what's this?" "It's a new medicine I developed. It's used when you need to save your life. Don't use it unless you have no other choice," Mu Linger said very seriously. "You mean, I should only use it when I'm about to die?" Gu asked. "Don't jinx it." Mu Linger glared at him. Gu accepted it graciously. "I'll remember it. You can go back now." "Chi brother, you have to be careful." Mu Ling was reluctant to part with them. She knew that even if she made the medicine sound mysterious, Chi brother wouldn't open it. His medical skills were many times better than hers, and he had high standards. He wouldn't be interested in her medicine. In reality, the medicine bottle wasn't actually filled with medicine, but rather a note. Chi brother wouldn't read it, but he would at least keep it with him, as if she was accompanying him. "Chi brother, you should leave first. Linger will watch you leave." Mu Ling was a little choked up. They were always in such a hurry. When would they be able to see each other again? Would they be able to survive Medical City's calamity smoothly and safely? Chapter 767. Mu Ling said she wanted to see them leave first, but Gu immediately nodded. "All right, then we're leaving." By the time Gu Qishao turned around, Mu Linger's heart had already shattered to pieces. She suddenly regretted her impulsive decision to chase after him. Why didn't she continue to pretend that she didn't know he was Gu Beiyue? Why didn't she pretend that she didn't know he was Medical City's abandoned disciple? Why didn't she pretend that she didn't know he would be leaving with Han Yunqi and Gu Beiwa today? She could have even pretended to rush to the Duke of Qin's estate to look for him this morning. If she pretended not to know anything, she could even tell Gu Qisha, "I like Qi Gij, I miss Qi Gij." As long as she could see Qi Gij, chat with him, and hear him call her lass, she would be satisfied for the rest of her life. But from today onwards, she couldn't say anything. In the end, she didn't shed any tears. Instead, she picked up her shattered heart and put it back together. A strong heart wasn't one that would never break. No matter how many times it was broken, it could always be put back together and resolutely welcome the next heartbreak. Qi brother Ling, will wait for you. It wasn't until the shadow guard came to urge her that Mu Ling reluctantly left. Mu Ling was only able to catch up to Han Yunqi because the shadow guard had led the way. As for the spies hidden in South Ning City, although they knew that Han Yunqi and the others were leaving, they couldn't follow their tracks. They had no idea where they were going or what they were going to do. Madame Hellion first went to Pilfine Pharmacy early in the morning, then left with the excuse that she had matters to attend to in her estate. Halfway there, she turned into an alley. If we can't even find out something like this, when the Lord blames us, we'll all have to bear the consequences. The masked man's back was facing the light, but his back was tall and sturdy. Xingge, they're all smart people. How do you want me to ask? After Yunqi came back, she didn't ask about Su Xiaoyu or Gu Beiyue's poisoning. I feel like she already knows what's going on. Madame Hellion said worriedly. If she knew what was going on, would you still be alive now? Do you think Han Yunqi is as kind and motherly as you? The man laughed disdainfully. Hellion Zuexiang, if you take care of things properly, I won't make trouble for your son. You can continue to be the madam of the Han family, and he will still be the only heir of the Han family. The Han family is so big that it is enough for you and your son to live a carefree life. But if things go wrong... Before the man named Xingge could finish speaking, Mrs. Hellion was shocked. What are you trying to do? You promised me that you wouldn't hurt her. Madame Hellion really was a spy from Northern Li. When she married Han Kongan, the Lord didn't tell her what her mission was, only that she had to live well. Her surname wasn't Hellion, but the Lord changed it for her to remind her not to forget where she came from. She naively thought that the Lord had let her off the hook by not giving her any missions. Once she married into the Han house, she knew her place and never fought. Over the past few years, the Lord had never contacted her. Until a few months ago, when Xingge suddenly came to find her and threatened her with Year's life. He wanted her to give him information on the Duke of Qin's estate and Pilfine Pharmacy. If Xingji's blade hadn't been in front of her face, she wouldn't have believed it. After all these years, she really believed that the Lord had forgotten about her. If possible, she didn't want to betray Han Yunqi either. If not for Han Yunqi, she and would have been in dire straits by now. But for Er's sake, she had no choice but to accept the Lord's orders. Haha, Hellion Zuexiang, you're not young anymore. Why are you still so childish? Xingge smiled coldly. I'll let you go. But what about the Lord? Do you think you can escape from him? What does the Lord want? Madame Hellion asked angrily. That's not a question for you or me to ask. Remember your duty. Also, find out where Han Yunqi and Gu Beiwa went as soon as possible. Xingge turned to leave. Madame Hellion hurriedly asked, Su Xiaoyu, is she still alive? Xingge was immediately displeased. You dare ask about her? Do you know that that stinky girl almost exposed your identity? You're the Lord's most hidden chess piece in the Han house. If I hadn't been smart that day, I wouldn't have been able to escape, let alone you. Madame Hellion's heart was filled with apprehension, but she didn't dare ask any questions. She watched as Xingge disappeared into the shadows of the alleyway. It had to be said that Madame Hellion really was the most hidden chess piece. If Su Xiaoyu hadn't run into her by chance, or if Long Feiyi hadn't sent people to keep an eye on Su Xiaoyu, no one would have suspected Madame Hellion at all. Long Feiyi and Gu Beiwa knew the truth, but Han Yunqi was still in the dark. Before she left, she even told Chu Shifeng to investigate the matter in secret. If Long Feiyi hadn't said anything, Han Yunqi would never have guessed that her seventh madam had betrayed her. Su Xiaoyu could be said to have made a contribution by accident, but her current situation wasn't good at all. She had been starving for 5 days and 5 nights. Forget about food. She hadn't even had a drink of water. The dark, gloomy cell resembled a dry well. Its walls were covered in moss and unknown vines. Su Xiaoyu lay listlessly on one side, chewing on a freshly planted vine. If it wasn't for these vines, she would have died long ago. She still didn't know who her kidnappers were, but they delivered food and water to her once every half a month. No matter how hungry she was, she didn't dare to eat it all at once. Instead, she kept eating slowly until she ran out, then used the vines to allay her hunger. She had already forgotten Chu Shifeng's training, but she still remembered some survival skills. Thus, she wouldn't die so easily. She curled up and let down her waist-length hair, draping it over her body to keep warm. She was going to sleep. Sleeping was the best way to conserve energy and delay the digestion of food. Unexpectedly, the cell door suddenly opened. She immediately grew alert. This wasn't the time to deliver food. As expected, the newcomer was a girl around 16 or 17 years old. She was dressed in clean, pink robes that stood out in the dark, filthy cell. Su Xiaoyu couldn't see her face clearly in the dim light, but she could see that the girl's large, luminous eyes were shining brightly. Su Xiaoyu couldn't help but blink. Her eyes had to be bigger and brighter than the girl's. "Aya, you're not dead yet?" The girl's tone was acerbic. "I thought I'd come to collect a corpse today. Aya, should I be happy or unhappy?" Unwilling to be outdone, Su Xiaoyu retorted, "Did your father or mother die? Or did you come all the way here to collect a corpse?" As soon as these words were spoken, the already cold prison cell seemed to have become even colder. It was so cold that even the guards outside could not help but feel their hair stand on end. It wasn't a good thing to offend Miss Yuer. Miss Yuer was the master's most trusted disciple. Her methods were just as frightening. This Miss Yu wasn't referring to Su Xiaoyu, but the girl whose eyes were filled with fury at this very moment. "Dead father? Dead mother?" Miss Yuer suddenly sneered. "I'm so sorry. I've lost my father and mother since young, so I really don't need to collect a corpse." As she said that, she walked towards Su Xiaoyu. Su Xiaoyu could clearly feel a strong murderous aura closing in on her. She reckoned that this girl's martial arts skills were far above hers. What should she do? She curled up in a corner, not moving at all as she watched the girl walk towards her. Suddenly, Su Xiaoyu grabbed a handful of soil and threw it towards the girl. The girl dodged sideways and waved off some of the soil that had landed on her shoulder with interest. Su Xiaoyu had poisoned the soil, and she was secretly happy. Who knew that the girl looked at her with disdain? "You dare to show off your slight skill in front of an expert. What a joke." Saying that, she squatted down and pressed one hand on Su Xiaoyu's right shoulder. Su Xiaoyu's right hand, which was about to poison, was unable to lift up. She quickly pressed on Su Xiaoyu's left shoulder. "You know poison? Who are you?" Su Xiaoyu asked angrily. She was shocked. She felt as if thousands of ants were gnawing on her shoulders. It was as if they were gnawing on her flesh and drilling into her bones. The soreness was indescribable. "Who I am isn't important. What's important is who is Gu?" the girl asked. "I don't know. I'm not familiar with him," Su Xiaoyu replied loudly. "Not saying." The girl laughed. "I don't know. If I knew, I would definitely tell you." Su Xiaoyu was speaking the truth. She would not suffer for someone who was not important to her. If the poison in her shoulder was not cured, her hands would be crippled. "All right, then I'll ask you again. Is there a phoenix birthmark on Han Yunqi's back?" the girl asked again. Su Xiaoyu suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. However, she could not recall it. "Is there?" The girl's patience was not bad. "I don't know," Su Xiaoyu replied loudly. Not to mention that she did not know. Even if she knew, she would definitely not say it. She would not reveal a single word about her master. The girl's smile became even more brilliant. That pair of bright eyes were in high spirits in the dusk. She said, "All right, then tell me, what do you know?" "I don't know anything. I'm just a servant girl." Su Xiaoyu scolded. "You're also a dog. You should be clear about the rules." Slap. The girl fiercely slapped her. Su Xiaoyu fell to the ground. Her shoulders hurt so much that she could not move her hands. She glared fiercely at the girl. Her gaze was fierce and sinister, causing the girl to shrink back. "You're so young, but you're quite capable. I'll give you a month's time. If you don't die, we'll slowly play." After the girl finished speaking, she flicked her sleeves and left. Outside the secret prison, the sun shone brightly, illuminating the girl's young face. It also illuminated her pair of large eyes that had been sinister for a long time. She was none other than Bai Yanqing's disciple, Juni Xie's little junior sister, Bai Yuqiao. It went without saying that Madame Hulian's lord was Bai Yanqing. "Miss you, the lord is urging you," the attendant reported in a low voice. "I know." Bai Yuqiao instructed in a low-key manner. "Keep an eye on that girl. She's Han Yunqi's servant girl. Keep her for future use." After she finished speaking, she rushed to see Bai Yuqiao. Bai Yuqiao was waiting for her in a carriage by the roadside. "Master, that girl won't say anything," she reported truthfully. "There's no rush." Bai Yanqing put down the chess record in his hand and asked, "You girl, where do you think Han Yunqi and Gu Beiyue went?" "Up to Tianshan? I heard that Gu Beiyue's medical skills are not bad. Could it be that he went up to Tianshan to treat Long Fei Ye's injuries?" Bai Yuqiao asked. Chapter 768. This was probably the first time Bai Yanqing felt uncertain. He had many guesses, but he couldn't be sure of any of them. Han Yunqi shouldn't have gone to Celestial Mountain at this time, he muttered to himself. Nor should she have left South Ning. Why? Why? As he spoke, he glanced at Bai Yuqiao. "You lass, why do you think? Why not go to Medicine City?" Bai Yuqiao continued. Actually, anyone with half a brain could tell that Han Yunqi had to stabilize the south-central regions for Long Fei's sake and prevent internal strife. Medical City's blockade of South Ning was the root of the unrest. Although Bailey Yuanlong had complete control of the commander-in-chief's estate and claimed to fight Medical City to the end, Han Yunqi and the others weren't stupid enough to court death by going to Medical City. It would be useless even if they went. They could lead troops to attack Medical City, but that would only anger the entire medical industry, and even Cloud Realm's various powers and commoners. At that time, Han Yunqi, a descendant of the poison sect, would be branded a scourge of the world. "Master, if they join forces with Medicine City against Medical City, do they have a chance of winning?" Bai Yuqiao asked. "None." Bai Yanqing was certain. Medicine and medicine are one family to begin with. His Excellency Pill King might help her, but Medicine City won't give him any face on this matter. Just watch and see. The King of Medicine can help Han Yunqi now, but he can't help Han Yunqi forever. The King of Medicine's medicine hut couldn't help everyone, because most of the patients were ordinary. They didn't need medicine from the hut, only medicine from Medicine City. Bai Yuqiao didn't understand. "Master, then where will they go?" Bai Yanqing glanced at her without a word. Bai Yuqiao felt that although her master was annoying, he wasn't as fierce as before. Thus, she waited for a while and asked timidly, "Master, does Han Yunqi really have a phoenix birthmark?" "What's that?" Her master had asked her to interrogate Su Xiaoyu. In fact, she herself did not know what it was. He didn't know if Bai Yanqing heard him, or if he didn't want to answer, or if he didn't hear him. But he didn't answer Bai Yuqiao. Bai Yuqiao knew his temper, so he didn't dare to continue asking. Until now, she still couldn't figure out her master's attitude towards Han Yunqi. Did he want her dead or alive? Thinking of this, Bai Yuqiao could not help but think of his senior brother, Juni Xie. A few days ago, they'd received news that senior brother and the two imperial princes had gotten into a huge conflict with the Winter Crow clan. The crown prince had been heavily injured, but Winter Crow's medical skills were far behind. Senior brother had escorted the crown prince back to treat his wounds, but the second imperial prince had refused to leave. He'd vowed to buy a horse no matter what, so he was still at Winter Crow. Bai Yuqiao knew that this was senior brother's scheme. The crown prince would probably die on the road, while the second imperial prince would be in grave danger as well. She had no idea how senior brother was going to deal with the wrath of the Northern Dynasty's emperors, much less when he'd be able to buy a horse. Senior brother was working himself to the bone at Wintercrow, while master had done so much behind his back. What are you spacing out for? Why aren't you leaving yet? Bai Yanqing said coldly. Bai Yuqiao obediently went to drive the carriage while she asked innocently, Master, where are we going? Medical City. Bai Yanqing said coldly. Medical City's Apricot Woods Conference would be held in 10 days. That event represented the highest level of medical skills in Cloud Realm continent, so of course he wanted to join in on the fun and broaden his horizons. Moreover, he was curious as to what other methods Gu Yuntian had to deal with Han Yunqi besides sealing off the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate. He'd been planning for years, and everything was already in place. With the three countries at war, the Long Fei Yi wanted to sit back and reap the benefits while Gu Yuntian wanted to be the oriole stalking the cicada, unaware of the mantis behind. He wanted to steal everything the Long Fei Yi had painstakingly built up. According to his original plan, as long as Juni Xie's troops arrived and trained them for a month, the three countries would fall into a state of exhaustion. With all three sides injured and lacking in food and medicine, Northern Li's armored cavalry could head south and sweep through the three countries until they reached the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate. Of course he knew that the Long Fei Yi had an ace navy in his hands that could threaten Northern Li's eastern borders from the Eastern Sea. But he wouldn't give the Long Fei Yi the chance to do so. He had a huge secret in his hands that was enough to destroy the Long Fei Yi at a critical moment and cause all of his subordinates to fall apart. Over the past few days, Gu Yuntian had been doing two things: waiting and keeping an eye on the situation on Celestial Mountain. But he never expected such a turn of events. Han Yunqi's identity as the poison sex orphan had been exposed, nor did he expect Ning Cheng to find so many red-robed generals to end the war ahead of time. Even less did he expect the Long Fei Yi to control the lustbite energy. His plans had been thoroughly ruined, but fortunately, the situation wasn't terrible at all. In fact, it was even more advantageous for him and Northern Li than before. Now he only needed to do two things. One was to continue waiting until Medical City sealed off the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate, and Ning Cheng led his troops south. The other was to force Han Yunqi into a dead end. The closer a person was to a dead end, the more hatred they would have in their heart. He had instigated the people of Liberty City not to kill Han Yunqi, but to arouse the hatred in her heart. Unfortunately, Gu had shown up before the people of Liberty City could do anything. Thinking about this, Bai Yanqing slowly narrowed his eyes that were as sharp as an eagle's. Who is Gu? Bai Yanqing was on his way to Medical City, and Han Yunqi and the others were also on their way to Medical City. It was unknown whether they would run into each other in Medical City. Han Yunqi and the others rode on horses. After 3 days and 3 nights in the deep mountains and forests, they finally saw a town. Esteemed Wangfei, there'll be more people down the mountain. For safety's sake, let's disguise ourselves, Gu Beiwe said. Actually, they could have openly gone to Medical City, but Gu Beiwe was low-key and cautious. He didn't want anyone to know his whereabouts in case new problems cropped up. Gu Beiwe and Long Fei Yi both preferred to keep their facial disfigurements quiet. Once they made a move, it would be a fatal blow to guarantee victory. The results were the same, but the process was different. Long Fei Yi's process was cruel and ruthless, while Gu Beiyue's was gentle and gentle. Chu Shifeng had already prepared a large carriage on the side. Han Yunqi was going to disguise herself as a sickly woman to seek medical treatment from Medical City. Han Yunqi was about to get on the carriage when Gu stopped her. He rubbed his chin and studied Gu Beiyue. Doctor, as this young master sees it, you should be the patient. You don't need to pretend to be one to look like one. Gu Beiwe laughed at himself, while Han Yunqi's face darkened. She elbowed Gu hard in the chest. I'm hurt. Gu clutched his chest exaggeratedly as he pressed Han Yunqi's shoulders. If she didn't help him up, he'd topple over. Poison lass, don't pretend anymore. I'll do it. You'll be my wife and stay by my side, serving me at all times. Gu Beiyu is still a doctor. If he can't cure me, he'll come with us to Medical City to seek treatment. Gu Beiwe was still smiling. Before Han Yunqi could speak, Chu Shifeng slapped Gu's hand away. Gu, if you keep being rude, Don't blame us for being rude. Gu Qishao replied with 2 words. Boring. Xiaoqi. Han Yunqi suddenly smiled, her voice very gentle. Gu had a bad premonition. He grew serious and said, do as you've done before. Don't waste time. Hurry on, the road is more important. Before, Han Yunqi would be the patient, Gu Beiwei her older brother, and Gu her retainer. Xiaoqi, you're so pretty that you'll attract too much attention as a retainer. I think you're more suited. I'm suited to be your older brother, right? Gu smiled beautifully. Poison lass, you're as pretty as me. Han Yunqi was indeed very beautiful, especially when she smiled. That kind of temperament was something she was born with, something that couldn't be nurtured no matter how much effort was put into nurturing it. No matter how good her makeup was, it couldn't bring out her aura. Her smile was even prettier than Gu's. No, you're suited to be a shadow guard. Don't show your face. Gu Beiwei laughed out loud, while Chu Shifeng didn't know what to say. Could he tell esteemed Wang Fei that the shadow guard squad didn't want Gu? At this moment, Su Donglin popped out from the side. Gu, you don't have to travel with us. Although Su Donglin's life had been saved by Gu, he was resolutely loyal to His Highness Duke of Qin, and would never betray him. What did loyalty mean? It meant protecting His Highness Duke of Qin, and esteemed Wang Fei with his life. Their love was stronger than gold. Gu narrowed his eyes at Su Donglin, but before he could speak, Su Donglin said, don't say anything. If you want my life, I'll give it back to you. It was rare for Gu to be the target of everyone's attacks. He was about to strike back when the messenger eagle arrived. Everyone immediately grew serious. The envelope was very special, unlike the usual all-white and all-blue envelopes. It seemed to have been custom-made in a light purple color, with plum branches and fallen flowers drawn on it. Han Yunqi held it in her hands and recognized Long Feiye's signature at a glance. Both surprised and delighted, she quickly opened the envelope and saw that even the paper was a faint purple with plum blossoms flying about. Gu Beiwei and Gu had a rare moment of tacit understanding as they both stared at the letter in silence. Gu Beiwei had always been a quiet man, but only Long Feiyi could make Gu quiet down in front of Han Yunqi. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness wrote to you in a special envelope? Chu Shifeng broke the silence on purpose. Han Yunqi didn't notice his words, because her thoughts were all on the letter. She stared at it for a while before looking up at the crowd in confusion. Why is it empty? That's right, Long Feiye's reply was empty. What did he mean? She'd written to say she missed him, and called him an idiot. But he'd written an empty letter back? What did he want to tell her? Han Yunqi really didn't understand, but the crowd was too embarrassed to give her an answer. This was a little game between husband and wife. Long Feiye's way of teasing his wife. What right did outsiders have to explain? Even Gu Qishao fell silent. Han Yunqi quickly sensed that something was wrong, and her face flushed red. She'd blurted it out because she was too curious. For a moment, she didn't even think that Long Feiyi was playing tricks on her. I'll go change my clothes. She hid the letter in her sleeve, and awkwardly ducked into the carriage. Once inside, she wasn't in the mood to change, but took out the letter and carefully examined it. Chapter 769. Han Yunqi hid in the carriage and checked Long Feiye's blank letter over and over again. She didn't even miss the inside of the envelope, but there was nothing but blankness. She couldn't find any ink. What does he mean? This should be Long Feiye's first time writing her a letter. Or rather, it should be a reply, but it turned out to be an empty letter. Is it because he's not good at expressing himself, so he decided not to express himself? If that's the case, then Han Yunqi was truly disappointed. Perhaps Han Yunqi was overthinking things, but she had a bad premonition. It didn't seem like Long Fei's style to reply to a letter. According to his style, even if he wasn't good at expressing himself, he'd still reply with, I've received the letter. Or maybe I'm just overthinking things. Maybe he wants to give me a surprise. And this is only the first step. Han Yunqi comforted herself. At a time like this, Han Yunqi felt ashamed of herself for having such romantic thoughts. She wrote 2 more letters to Long Feiyi, one to tell him about their journey and how his internal injuries were recovering. The other was the same, Long Fei, I miss you. Everyone put on a disguise, but Gu Qixiao refused to be a shadow guard no matter what. In the end, he accepted the original arrangement. Han Yunqi disguised herself as a sickly young miss from a rich family. Gu Beiwe stuck a full beard on his handsome face to act as Han Yunqi's older brother. Gu used a human skin mask to disguise himself as a bodyguard and driver. Chu Shifeng and Su Donglin naturally followed them in the shadows, with a group of shadow guard. They climbed over the mountains and ate a hot meal in the city before continuing on their journey without stopping. That night, while everyone was sleeping outdoors, Gu Beiwe received a secret letter from Long Fei. It contained a set of medicinal pills, the Phoenix Breath pill he'd given to Kenzo. Although these medicinal pills couldn't heal Gu Beiwe completely, they could restore 20 to 30% of his internal energy in a short period of time. As for whether it was 20 or 30%, that would depend on Gu Beiwe's own efforts. The letter was very short. It explained the effects of the medicinal pills and the things to take note of during cultivation, but didn't contain anything else. Long Fei didn't even explain where he'd gotten the pills or why he'd given them to him. Gu Beiwe stared at the short letter for a long time, unable to recover his senses. Who knew what he was thinking? What an exciting thing it was. When he'd found out that he'd lost all his internal energy and couldn't recover, he'd almost lost all hope. One had to know that even though he was unperturbed, he had spent countless nights sitting in boredom before he could finally accept this fact. Now there was hope in the midst of despair. He'd trained hard since he was young. The shadow art that carried the last memories his grandfather and parents had left for him. The shadow art that carried the heavy responsibility of protecting the Western Qin royal family. The shadow art that carried the burden of protecting the woman he'd hidden deep in his heart was finally coming back. He was about to have a chance to truly stand up again. But there wasn't a trace of excitement or joy in his eyes. Instead, they were frozen and full of heaviness. It was a pity that Han Yunqi couldn't see Gu Beiwe at this moment. Otherwise, she'd definitely feel that the heaviness in Gu Beiwe's eyes was very similar to the heaviness she'd seen in Long Fei's eyes many times. What was this heaviness for? When Long Fei sent a secret letter to Gu Beiwe, he'd casually destroyed it after he'd read it. But this letter, he carefully folded it back into the envelope and hid it in his sleeve. As for the medicinal pills, he didn't hesitate to take them. Gu Beiwe thought that trust should be the same as the feeling of liking someone. It was duty-bound to be duty-bound to be duty-bound. All was quiet. Han Yunqi slept alone in the carriage. Gu Beiwe was dozing off outside the carriage. The shadow guards were all around taking turns to keep watch. Gu Beiwe only had to be wary of Gu. However, Gu was the best to be wary of. He was very smart, but his focus was all on Han Yunqi. It had nothing to do with Han Yunqi. Even if he noticed something strange, he was too lazy to investigate. After taking the Phoenix Perch pill, Gu Beiwe began to cultivate bitterly every night. After a few days of rushing about, he was already halfway through the journey. The day of the Apricot Woods conference was getting closer and closer. Of course, the situation in Cloud Realm continent had changed as well. Medicine City finally gave in to Medical City's pressure and announced that they were temporarily suspending all dealings with Pilfine Pharmacy and the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate. Only after Han Yunqi's identity was confirmed would they reconsider their cooperation. It was true that the Wang clan, who controlled Medicine City, was loyal to Long Fei. But when they couldn't even protect themselves, there was no need to talk about loyalty. Fortunately, Wang Gong was still a humane man. A few days before the announcement, he allowed Pilfine Pharmacy to make a few large purchases and send out the goods in a timely manner. If I knew this would happen, I would have taken the chance to remove all restrictions on the Mu clan. Gu wasn't satisfied. For the sake of taking over Medicine City, he and Mu Ling had both gone to jail. Lady Lianxin had asked them to spare the Mu clan for the sake of giving birth to a child. Long Fei had seized the chance to have the Wang clan lift some restrictions on the Mu clan and leave a way out for Medical City. He hoped that Mu Ling could one day restore the Mu clan to its former glory. After all, Long Fei's ultimate goal wasn't to let the Wang clan dominate Medicine City. It could only be said that Mu Ling was too busy to be in two places, while Han Yunqi's identity as the poison sect had been exposed too early. There's still 7 to 8 days. As long as there's no large-scale epidemic, we should have enough medicine in stock, Gu Beiwa said. The king of medicine has already replied. He's still willing to help us, Han Yunqi said seriously. Esteemed Wang Fei, Wang Gong can only help us in an emergency. He can't solve the root of the problem. You mustn't agree to anything. Gu Beiyue's expression was serious. If we don't have enough medicine, we can use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Medicine Ghost Valley should have a lot of high-grade ingredients. We can use this opportunity to put on airs in front of Medicine City and Medical City, and by the hearts of the common people. They didn't use high-grade ingredients in large quantities, but rather common ones. However, high-grade ingredients could still treat some minor ailments with immediate results. The key was whether or not Gu was willing to spend the money. Gu smiled flirtatiously. As long as Poison Lass needs it, forget about Medicine Ghost Valley. Even if you want my life, I'd be happy to give it to you. They were clearly discussing a very serious issue, but Gu Beiwa and Gu made it sound so casual. Han Yunqi didn't know how difficult her situation would be without these two. Han Yunqi was relieved about the problem of medicine, but she also didn't have to worry about the issue of medicine. Over the past few days, she had been receiving letters from Mu Linger, saying that a dozen or so doctors would travel thousands of miles to Pilfine Pharmacy every day. They would listen to Imperial Physician Huang's arrangements and be sent to the 3 central prefectures and several cities in Jiangnan to practice medicine. This was the biggest surprise that Gu Beiwa had given Han Yunqi. She never thought that this shut-in, who usually didn't socialize, would have such good connections. He was able to find so many colleagues who were willing to help him regardless of the cost. Of course, Medical City had long since announced that all doctors who stayed in the Commander-in-Chief's manor were disqualified from practicing medicine. Medicine City had also issued a ban, forbidding any medicine shops from selling the ingredients prescribed by these doctors. It could be said that the medical system of the Commander-in-Chief's manor had completely broken away from Medical City and Medicine City, and was self-sufficient. In the long run, this path would lead to a dead end, but it was extremely effective in the short term. The originally restless civil unrest had mostly been fanned out by people with ulterior motives. Thanks to the timely replenishment of resources from the medicine shops, the public's resentment gradually subsided. After all, most people only cared about what was in front of them. No patient would refuse treatment or protest against the Commander-in-Chief's manor for the sake of Medical City's righteousness and the poison sect's scourge on the world. It's time to step out, Han Yunqi said seriously. The Commander-in-Chief's manor had long publicly acknowledged that they would fight Medical City to the end, but as the person involved, she hadn't officially admitted anything. She thought that if she took advantage of the good situation in the south to step out and publicly denounce Medical City's inhumanity and accuse them of slandering the poison sect, it would definitely boost the Commander-in-Chief's manor's morale and garner the support of the commoners. I'll step out with you. Gu had been waiting for Han Yunqi to say this for a long time. Gu Beiwa looked at the two of them like an older brother and wanted to laugh. No rush, it's not time yet. We have to be on guard against the old fox behind the spies. Gu Beiwa was the most cautious of them all. He would either not make a move, or he'd make sure nothing went wrong. Right now, the most important thing was whether they could smoothly reach Medical City and participate in the Apricot Woods Conference. Han Yunqi and Gu nodded at the same time. Along the way, Han Yunqi had grown to trust and admire Gu Beiwa. Gu, on the other hand, had found Gu Beiwa much more pleasing to the eye than before. Besides them, no one else in the world could guess that they were on their way to Medical City, much less that they were planning to do something earth-shattering. Everyone was waiting to see a good show at the Commander-in-Chief's estate. Many people were even betting that the Commander-in-Chief's estate could hold out for a few months. In the Western military barracks, Ning Cheng had just defeated Chu Shifeng and was in a good mood. His figure was tall and straight to begin with, but now he was dressed in silver-white battle robes that made him seem as lofty and untouchable as a mountain. Your lordship will definitely make Chu Shifeng surrender in 10 days at most. He laughed heartily. But his voice was still lofty and unapproachable. In other words, our army can march south after 10 days? The deputy general rejoiced. I heard that Dr. Gu Beiwa from the commander-in-chief's estate has quite the skills. He helped Han Yunxi recruit quite a few doctors, Ning Qing said. Isn't that so? Judging from the situation there, they should be able to hold out for at least half a year. The deputy general couldn't help but admire him. If not for those red coat cannons, we probably wouldn't have been able to finish the war within that time. Ning Qing rejoiced inwardly. If he hadn't been decisive enough, he wouldn't have been able to seize the opportunity to attack the south-central regions. But the war wasn't his true goal. His true goal was Han Yunxi. He wasn't willing to be Medical City's running dog and capture Han Yunxi for them, but needed an excuse to force the commander-in-chief's estate to hand over Han Yunxi. Only by obtaining Han Yunxi would he have a chance to ask Chu Qingge about the Shadow Clan's whereabouts. Chapter 770. 10 days. Chu Tianyin had already retreated to the last city. Ning Cheng would need 10 days at most to take it. If Chu Tianyin failed to defend the city, Emperor Kong Cheng would definitely call for a halt and surrender. After all, they wouldn't be far from the capital's stronghold. Looking at the map on the table, the usually calm and composed Ning Cheng couldn't help but feel a little restless. After a moment of thought, he coldly ordered, "Pass on the order to attack the city." The deputy general was shocked. He'd thought the Ning King had summoned him to discuss how to win the last battle beautifully. Who would have thought the king would suddenly give the order to attack the city? Your Highness, are we attacking the city tonight? The deputy general asked tentatively. Yes, Ning Cheng replied without hesitation. The deputy general had never disobeyed the king's orders before, let alone a military one. But this time, he was ready to throw caution to the wind. Your Highness, please forgive this general for speaking out of turn, but tonight isn't the best time to attack. After all, the last battle had lasted more than 10 days, and had just ended the day before yesterday. Their brothers hadn't even had time to catch their breaths yet, and the casualties were still being counted. A portion of the army's supplies had yet to be replenished. Although they'd won several battles in a row, and needed to take advantage of their good morale, they still needed to rest for 2 or 3 days. Your Highness, although such a rash move might catch the enemy off guard, our army might not necessarily gain the upper hand, the deputy general advised. Ning Qing didn't need too much analysis or reminders. He knew better than the deputy general when the best time to attack was. At this moment his eyes were lowered. His gaze seemed to be on the map, but it also seemed to be wandering. No one knew what he was thinking. The deputy general didn't dare persuade him any further when he saw that he hadn't spoken for a long time. After a long while, Ning Qing silently waved his hand and dismissed him. Ning Qing appeared to be silent, but his heart was in turmoil. Even he was shocked by his own decision. He had been on the battlefield for a long time, and was always good at strategizing. Just now, he had lost his mind and made such a decision. If it wasn't for the deputy general's bold persuasion, the consequences would have been unimaginable once this order was passed down. Was he in such a hurry to end the war on the Western Front and attack the Southern Front? Why? He walked around the huge map and tapped his knuckles on the table. Finally he sat back down. He thought that he must have been too anxious to compete with Long Feiyi, and was too anxious to find out the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan. After drinking a few glasses of wine in silence, he asked in a deep voice, "How's it going?" Only his personal attendant knew what he meant. The attendant replied, "We're still looking, but what?" His impatient tone betrayed his calm appearance. "It's just that thing is really hard to find." The attendant looked troubled. The group of people he sent out to look for a golden needle had searched everywhere Han Yunxi had gone to, and the people she had treated, but they couldn't find any clues. In the vast sea of people, it wasn't easy to find a single person, let alone a needle. If it's easy to find, why would this prince need you? Ning Qing asked unhappily. The attendant was helpless and retorted, "Master, if you want Han Yunxi's golden needle, Why don't you just ask her for it after you capture Han Yunxi? You might not find it even if you spend so much effort. When he said this, Ningqing slowly turned his head to look at him. When the attendant saw his gaze, a chill ran down his spine, and he felt goosebumps all over his body. He didn't dare to look any longer. He tactfully lowered his head and silently retreated. In the large tent, only Ningqing was left. He held a wine cup, his thin lips gently caressing the rim of the cup, deep in thought. Ningqing was anxious to lead the troops south, while Chu Tianyin was tense. He had already received Gu Beiyue's orders. No matter what, he had to contain Ningqing until the end of the month. While Chu Tianyin was shocked by Han Yunxi's identity, he couldn't figure out what Long Feiyi and Gu Beiyue wanted to do. He was under Long Feiyi's control, and could only listen to his orders. However, if Long Feiyi and Gu Beiyue ruthlessly took revenge on Ningqing for him, he would be very happy. In contrast to Ningqing and Chu Tianyin's excitement and worry, Long Tianma was much more relaxed after surrendering. It wasn't that he was useless, but that his troops were pretty much exhausted. The Mu family troops were worthy of his pride to have been able to hold out for an entire month against Ningqing's red barbarian cannons. He had lost 4 major cities to Ningqing, so he could be considered to have truly occupied a corner of the east. General Mu, when do you think the Duke of Qin will descend Celestial Mountain? Long Tianma asked. Right now, many people were discussing Long Feiyi's attitude. After the matter of the poison sect was exposed, Long Feiyi's actions on Celestial Mountain were all rumors. He still hadn't publicly expressed his stance on Han Yunxi's identity as a poison sect survivor. Moreover, no one knew why he was still on Celestial Mountain. There's no reason for him to stay on Celestial Mountain, right? General Mu stroked his chin uncertain. Anyone who hadn't seen General Mu for a long time would definitely notice that General Mu had changed. He'd lost the resoluteness and bravery of a soldier, but gained the shrewdness and astuteness of a civil official. However, Long Tianma didn't think so. He had always understood General Mu's neutral stance in Tianning's court, especially after the General Mu married Mu Luyue to him. He was even more certain that General Mu wasn't just a talented general. In comparison, Mu Qinggu seemed much purer. Of course, Long Tianma kept these thoughts hidden deep in his heart. He'd never revealed them to anyone. But I still haven't heard of him descending the mountain, nor have I seen any major movements from the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate. Long Tianma asked next. General Mu laughed. Your Majesty, Han Yunxi is a descendant of the poison sect. Have you never thought that the Duke of Qin would abandon her as a chess piece? Before Long Tianma could reply, Mu Qinggu hastily interjected. He won't. His Highness Duke of Qin wouldn't do that. In his eyes, Qin Wangfei isn't just a chess piece. General Mu glared at him unhappily. What are you so agitated about? I'm speaking the truth, Mu Qinggu muttered. He. Zhen also believes that the Duke of Qin wouldn't be so heartless. Moreover, he's not the type to show weakness to Medical City, Long Tianma laughed. Your Majesty, whether it's Medical City or the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate, we can't afford to offend them with our current strength. You mustn't support Medical City in this matter, nor can you defend Han Yunxi, General Mu reminded him seriously, sticking to his neutral stance to the very end. It was obvious that Long Tianma and Mu Qingwu didn't like this stance. Rather than calling it neutral, it was more accurate to say that they swayed with the wind. Long Tianma was about to retort, but General Mu didn't give him the chance, and changed the topic. Your Majesty, there's been a lot of discussion in court recently about the issue of heirs. You're not young anymore. When Emperor Xian was your age, he already had 3 princes. Long Tianma had made Mu Luyue empress, and in the past 2 years, the Empress Dowager had helped him choose a few more concubines. Unfortunately, he was cold and indifferent to all of them, so there hadn't been any good news from the palace ever since. There were many rumors in and out of the palace that Long Tianma had some sort of homosexual fetish. Zhen understands. Every time General Mu urged him on, Long Tianma would say the same thing. He knew that General Mu wasn't just urging him to produce more offspring for the imperial family, but hinting that he shouldn't bully Mu Luyue too much. General Mu's reminders, or perhaps warnings, always stopped before going too far. It's good that your majesty understands. So speaking, he bid farewell, but didn't leave the palace to see Mu Luyue. Instead, he went to see the Empress Dowager. Long Tianma had followed him a few times out of curiosity, but found that General Mu's visit with the Empress Dowager wasn't anything serious. He was just looking for her to play chess. The three countries of Cloud Realm continent all had their own agendas, but far away in the north, the Northern Dynasty's emperors had no time to worry about such things. That was because Northern Li's crown prince was dead. Northern Li's crown prince had been heavily injured in the conflict with the Wintercrow clan. Under the escort of Junie Xie, he had rushed back to the country, but died before he could reach the capital. The entire Northern Li imperial capital was shrouded in thick, impenetrable black clouds. A violent storm, lightning, and thunder could descend at any moment. In the imperial study, the Northern Dynasty's emperor smashed his favorite white porcelain incense burner to pieces, landing squarely on Junie Xie's head before shattering to pieces on the ground. Junie Xie had already knelt in front of him for 3 days and 3 nights. His body was covered in wounds, but the most obvious one was the one on his head. He'd lost quite a bit of blood, but now the blood had congealed around the wound, obscured by his hair. Because of this wound, his naturally cold and evil face gained a hint of wildness. The Northern Dynasty's emperors had done everything he could to scold and vent. Only the 2 of them were left in the large imperial study, one sovereign and one subject, one sitting and one kneeling. After a day of silence, the Northern Dynasty's emperor seemed to grow tired. In a hoarse voice he asked, "Where's your master?" Aken doesn't know. Master's whereabouts have always been a mystery. Imperial father knows as well. Junie Xie replied honestly. He really didn't know where his master had gone. He assumed that his master would be waiting for him in the palace, but all that awaited him was the Northern Dynasty's emperor's curses and beatings for 3 days and 3 nights. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't disappointed. If his master was here, at least the Northern Dynasty's emperors wouldn't have lost all reason. He and his master had concocted this plan together. He always assumed that his master would arrange everything for him, but he never expected to face it alone. However, he'd be lying if he said he was too disappointed. Junie Xie knew that his master must have something he had to do. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left him alone to deal with the Northern Dynasty's emperors. The crown prince had obviously died in his hands. No matter how stupid the Northern Dynasty's emperors were, they would still suspect something. It wouldn't be easy for him to survive this disaster. Even you don't know? Haha. The Northern Dynasty's emperor sneered. Junie Xie didn't answer. He was thinking about how to convince the Northern Dynasty's emperors to trust him in the absence of his master. According to his plan, the second prince would soon die under the blades of the Wintercrow tribe. If the Northern Dynasty's emperors didn't trust him, he wouldn't be able to go to the Wintercrow tribe to collect the corpse. Then it would be difficult to buy a horse. The Northern Dynasty's emperors finally walked out of the imperial study. Unfortunately, he didn't tell Junie Xie to rise, so Junie Xie could only continue to kneel. Cloud Realm continent was filled with all sorts of factions. Long Fei Yi stood high on Celestial Mountain, overlooking all the commotion. Today he'd just finished playing a game of chess with old Kenzo, when a servant came to report that Bailey Mingxiang had arrived. Chapter 771. Upon hearing that Bailey Mingxiang had arrived at Celestial Mountain, Long Fei Yi was still tidying up his chess pieces. They should have reached Medical City by now. Naturally, he was asking about Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue's group. The Apricot Woods conference is in 3 days. If they're not in Medical City by then, it'll be troublesome, Kenzo said with a smile. As expected, the Shadow Guard soon delivered Gu Beiyue's letter saying they were safe. Your lordship is looking forward to it. Long Fei Yi's face had been taut these days, so it was rare to see him smile today. Kenzo stroked his beard, his heart filled with excitement. The Apricot Woods conference was about to rewrite Cloud Realm's history. After confirming that Han Yunxi's group had arrived safely at Medical City, Long Fei Yi's heart finally relaxed. Next, he would enter the final stage of recovering his internal energy. This was a crucial stage where even the slightest mistake could mean a life or death situation. Even the honored elders would be powerless to save him. Thus, he and the honored elders decided not to hold the conference here, but to go to the honored elders' cave instead. Master, are you going? Long Feiyi asked. Where's Bailey Mingxiang? Shouldn't you at least go down and bring her up yourself? Kenzo suggested. Just send someone down the mountain to bring her up. Have her stay in a side room for the next few days, Long Feiyi said. Kenzo was puzzled. Are you sure? Is there a problem? Long Feiyi retorted. Fei, if you don't put on a show, how are you going to bait the fish? Kenzo made things clear. Bailey Mingxiang was Long Feiyi's bait this time. One of his goals was to lure out that old fox. Since He Ilian knew how to use delaying tactics to deal with him, it proved that He Ilian and the old fox behind the 9 mystical palace were very clear about the lustbite energy. It was even possible that they already knew his identity as the East Qing Crown Prince. There were 3 stages to cultivating the lustbite power. The first was to accept the lustbite seal and use the seal to cultivate the lustbite power. The second was to control the lustbite power and use it freely. The third was to combine the lustbite power and the original internal energy to reach an invincible state. At that time, even the venerables of Tianshan Mountain would not be able to do anything to him, let alone the ordinary people at the foot of the mountain. As long as Long Feiyi healed his internal injuries, he would be considered to have completed the second stage of cultivation and fully control the lustbite power. However, if he wanted to cultivate to the third stage and combine the lustbite power with the original internal strength in his body to reach the invincible realm, he had to rely on the assistance of a martial arts genius to achieve it through dual cultivation. Even if he had the ability to reach the heavens, it was impossible for him to complete the third stage alone. In other words, if he couldn't find this martial arts genius, then the genius might be under someone else's control. His lustbite power would forever be stuck at the second stage. Bailey Mingxiang. Of course it wasn't a martial arts genius. Long Feiyi only wanted to use Bailey Mingxiang to create a false impression and mislead that old fox. As long as that old fox suspected Bailey Mingxiang, he would definitely make his move again. Long Feiyi knitted his brows at Kenzo. What's the play? For better or worse, we have to let people see that you value that girl. Kenzo suddenly thought of a plan and whispered in Long Feiyi's ear in pleasant surprise. Fei, the lustbite power hates emotions the most. Why don't we kill 2 birds with 1 stone? You can pretend to accept Miss Bailey and avoid trouble with that last Yunshi while fooling that old fox. The lustbite power hated emotions the most, so if Han Yunshi knew martial arts, then if Han Yunshi and Long Feiyi clashed swords one day, Long Feiyi's lustbite power would disappear completely. If Long Feiyi cultivated to the third stage of the lustbite power and combined it with his internal energy, then once Han Yunshi clashed swords with him, Long Feiyi would not only lose his lustbite power, but all of his internal energy as well. There was only one reason for this. He had her in his heart. This was his greatest and most fatal weakness. If the old fox understood the lustbite power and wanted to deal with Long Feiyi, he would definitely target Han Yunshi instead. Thus, Kenzo's suggestion wasn't a bad idea. Since Bailey Mingxiang was already on Celestial Mountain, why not let her temporarily take Han Yunshi's place and bear the brunt of Han Yunshi's danger? Long Feiyi didn't react at all. Kenzo hastened to add, Fei, if Miss Bailey is both your sweetheart and someone who can dual cultivate with you, then that old fox will definitely make his move soon. Finally, Long Feiyi gave him a sidelong glance and said, I can't do it. Fei, your identity will be revealed to the world one day. You can't hide it from that last Yunshi for the rest of your life. Explain it to her then and she'll understand, Kenzo coaxed. I can't do it. Long Feiyi dragged out his words. Kenzo wanted to continue, but Long Feiyi cut him off. Master, have you gone senile with age? You. Kenzo was infuriated. This brat is getting ruder and ruder. Do you think the old fox will believe such a preposterous act? Long Feiyi said. Find someone to bring Bailey Mingxiang here. She can stay here in the name of acupuncture treatment. There's no need to be so high profile about anything else. The more deliberate they were, the more suspicious they'd be. If they wanted to catch that old fox, they had to take things slowly. Carefree City had to be the old fox's handiwork to surround and kill Han Yunxi. Fortunately, they had Gu's help. Now that Gu was by Han Yunxi's side, he could at least guarantee Han Yunxi's safety. He'd rather owe Gu a favor than make things difficult for himself by playing such a senseless act. When he thought of how Han Yunxi would misunderstand him, he felt a trace of fear in his heart. Kenzo nodded thoughtfully. He Fei, you're a wolf hiding the heart of a fox. Kenzo was a martial arts practitioner who relied on his own strength to become the sect head of Kenzo. Although he was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't compare to Long Feiyi when it came to scheming. Kenzo immediately sent someone to fetch Bailey Mingxiang from the foot of the mountain. Master and disciple left the room through a secret passage as they chatted. Fei, tell Master the truth. East Qin's affairs. Why are you hiding it from the last Yunxi? Kenzo asked in a low voice. This was probably the first time anyone had asked him such a question so directly. Tang Zijin, Aunt Ru, and even Lady Tang and Tang Li were curious as well. They even guessed that it was because he didn't trust Han Yunxi enough. East Qin's affairs were truly a secret. There was no need to announce it until the best moment, but he'd definitely announce it when the time came. This status was his pride, his burden, and his responsibility. Even if he dreamed of establishing a new dynasty and ushering in a new era for Cloud Realm continent, he still had to acknowledge his status and respect East Qin's history. He carried too many hopes on his shoulders. He could complain of being tired, but he couldn't complain about being wronged, because these were all innate responsibilities. As the East Qin crown prince, he had to shoulder them. Why didn't he tell Han Yunxi these things? Even he didn't know why. If Han Yunxi found out his identity, what would her reaction be? Based on his understanding of her, she'd probably be happy and pleasantly surprised. However, what would happen if she found out about his identity? He couldn't guess. For every matter, as long as it started, he had a plan in his heart and knew the outcome. Only this matter was out of his control. He didn't know if he couldn't control himself or her. Seeing Long Feiyi spacing out, Kenzo nudged him. What are you thinking about? Everyone saw how that girl protected you at the abstinence hall. What, are you on guard against her as well? Kenzo asked. Long Feiyi didn't want to talk about this topic, so he replied half-heartedly. My life is in her hands. How can I not be on guard? Kenzo laughed out loud. If you're on guard against her, then she won't be the one to hurt you. Haha, that's right. If he was still on guard against her, then he wouldn't be sincere. If he wasn't sincere, how could Han Yunxi make his lust bite power disappear? That's great. Long Feiyi said something against his will. He even hid Han Yunxi's identity from Kenzo. After Mute Granny died, he was the only one left in the world who knew about Han Yunxi's identity. Not long ago, he found out that someone else also knew about it. Although they weren't on the same path, he still hoped that that person wouldn't betray his trust. The master and disciple were silent for a long time. After exiting the secret passage, they walked through a mountain path and arrived at the mysterious ice cave where the Venerable One cultivated. Even though it was midsummer, the cold air was still blowing in their faces. It was as cold as the northern wind in December. A Venerable One was already waiting at the door. The Venerable One cultivated wholeheartedly. He didn't care about the secular world, nor did he interfere. The reason why he helped was because of the lust bite power. Once the lust bite power was used, it was invincible in the martial arts world. No one in the East Qin imperial clan had successfully cultivated it. And before the lust bite power fell into the hands of the East Qin imperial clan, no one in the martial arts world had successfully cultivated it. The Venerable One hoped that one day, he would be able to see the true power of the lust bite power from Long Feiyi. Kenzo sent Long Feiyi to the entrance of the cave, and couldn't help but sigh. When will you find someone who can dual cultivate with you? To be able to dual cultivate with Long Feiyi, and help him reach the invincible realm, it had to be a martial arts genius. This genius would be able to withstand the lust bite power in his dantian. The sword sect master doted on Duan Muyao, because her innate talents were similar to Luo Qingling's. Still, Long Fei was more or less a factor as well. Although Duan Muyao hadn't reached the level of being able to withstand the lustbite power, he had always secretly hoped that Duan Muyao could lay a good foundation, so that one day, she could dual cultivate with Long Fei Yi. Seeing that she had a home, seeing that she had a better life than Qingling, he felt some comfort in his heart. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. After that night of madness, he hadn't mentioned Duan Muyao again. But that didn't mean he had forgotten about his injury. Madness was to expose the injury and vent the pain. If he wasn't mad, he had to hide the injury and cover the pain. Was it better to be mad or not? The feeling was like drinking water. Only the person would know if it was hot or cold. Long Fei Yi was about to enter the cave, when he suddenly turned around. Master, I've already found this person. Kinzo was very shocked and blurted out, "Who is it?" His mind unconsciously began to search for experts in the martial arts world. Someone with that kind of talent had to be a top expert. Unfortunately, even after thinking about all the experts he knew of in the martial arts world, he still couldn't guess who it was. Chapter 772. Kinzo couldn't guess, but he was both surprised and delighted. He wasn't afraid that this person would be hard to find, or that they wouldn't cooperate with Long Fei Ye's dual cultivation. He was only afraid that such a person didn't exist in this world. "Fei, hurry and tell me, just who is it?" Kinzo was so nervous that he lost his composure, but Long Fei Ye only smiled at him. "It's a secret." "Fei, you're not deceiving master, are you? Fei, tell me, just who is it?" "Stinking brat. Stop right there. Did you hear me? Just who is it? Is it a man or a woman? How old is he? What's your relationship with him or her? When did you find this person?" Kinzo had a pile of questions. He chased after Long Fei Yi for a few steps, but Long Fei Yi didn't pay him any attention. He was furious. If not for Long Fei Yi's tight schedule, he would have chased after him and interrogated him thoroughly. "This stinking brat shouldn't be lying to me. When did he find someone who could dual cultivate with him? He's too good at hiding. He even hid it from his master. Just who is it?" For the next few days, Long Fei Yi and the honored elders were both in closed-door cultivation. Kinzo was depressed by the word secret. Of course, he didn't forget to tell Bailey Mingxiang the truth. He wanted Bailey Mingxiang to play along and lure the snake out of its hole. Bailey Mingxiang was very calm after learning the truth. She settled down in the room next to Long Fei Ye's recuperation room and entered Long Fei Ye's room 3 times a day, staying for about an hour each time. An hour was exactly the time she needed to perform acupuncture. Unfortunately, she had to watch over the empty room and pass each day like a year. She'd been on Celestial Mountain for days now, but she still hadn't seen His Highness Duke of Qin. It was impossible to say that she wasn't a bit disappointed. She didn't think she was that noble. If feelings could be controlled, then what was the point of liking or disliking someone? How could she feel happy or unhappy? Emotions could not be controlled, but they could be restrained. Bailey Mingxiang was also a person who would let her imagination run wild. She sat at the tea table and thought about a lot of things. What he thought about the most was the secret of the phoenix birthmark on the Princess Consort's back. If there was a day when His Highness found out about the Princess Consort's past, would His Highness still dote on the Princess Consort? If there was a day when the Princess Consort found out about her past, would she still like His Highness? If they became enemies in the end, where would her heart go? She would not reveal this secret, but she knew that this secret would be revealed one day. At the very least, the identity of His Highness could not be hidden forever. Looking at the tea set that His Highness Duke of Qin had used, Bailey Mingxiang unconsciously reached out. However, before she could touch the master's cup, she sighed softly and withdrew her hand. Suppose one day they stopped loving each other, then would she be able to love? Thinking up to here, Bailey Mingxiang suddenly broke into a self-mocking laugh. What was wrong with her today? Why did she have to think so much? Even if there was a day when they stopped loving each other, she could not love. He was her master, and she was his servant. What right did she have to love him? Besides, how could they not love each other? Even if they found out about her past, they would still love each other. It would just be a matter of hate. Love and hate intertwined, entangling each other for eternity. Esteemed Princess Consort, if such a day comes, please believe in His Highness Duke of Qin, Bailey Mingxiang muttered to herself. It was almost time for today's treatment. Bailey Mingxiang packed up her needles and went out. There were 2 attendants waiting outside the door. They often chatted with her, and today was no exception. Miss Bailey, is His Highness Duke of Qin's injuries better? One of the attendants asked. Bailey Mingxiang sighed softly. With such serious injuries, it will take at least a year or so for him to recover. Didn't you come? What kind of needles did you use? Where is esteemed Princess Consort? Is she not coming back? The attendant asked again. You won't understand even if I tell you. I'm leaving. As Bailey Mingxiang was about to leave, the attendant asked again. Miss Mingxiang, won't you follow His Highness Duke of Qin for more than a year? Bailey Mingxiang smiled but didn't answer. When night fell, she would have to practice martial arts with the old Kenzo, so she had to go back and sleep first. No matter what, she had to do her best to make this act real and complete her mission. Almost at the same time that Bai Yanqing arrived at Medical City, news of Bailey Mingxiang's visit to Celestial Mountain reached his ears. Bailey Mingxiang, Bai Yanqing muttered to himself. Beauty's blood. When Juni Xia had brought back a drop of poisoned blood from Yuzhou Island, it had taken him a long time to figure out that it was not only Beauty's blood, but also the blood of a mermaid. It was precisely because of that drop of blood that he began to question Long Fei Ye's origins. Does she know martial arts? Bai Yanqing asked. The messenger replied truthfully. We've investigated her. She's the youngest daughter of the Bailey family. For some reason, Han Yunxi took her in as a maidservant. She knows medicine and poisons, but not martial arts. Bai Yanqing was an extremely suspicious person. He fell silent and began to ponder a few questions. Bailey Mingxiang's blood was highly toxic. This meant that Long Fei Yi had used her to cultivate Beauty's blood. Those who could cultivate Beauty's blood had to have a different body type, and those who cultivated Beauty's blood would die. Bailey Mingxiang had probably been saved by Han Yunxi. It wasn't easy to cure Bailey Mingxiang's poison. To be precise, it was an extremely difficult task. Bailey Mingxiang was just a servant. If she wasn't still useful, why would Han Yunxi save her? Could it be that Long Fei Yi had asked Han Yunxi to save Bailey Mingxiang? Also, why did Bailey Mingxiang come to Tianshan Mountain at this time? Was it really to treat Long Fei Yi with acupuncture? Did she know martial arts or not? Find an opportunity to test her, and see if she knows martial arts. Bai Yanqing ordered in a low voice. After the messenger left, Bai Yuqiao came over. Master, my subordinates have interrogated her no less than 5 times. That girl Su Xiaoyu couldn't explain clearly about the phoenix birthmark. I ordered people to test her before. Based on her answers, I'm afraid that she really doesn't know about it, and has never seen it before. So the Chu family, and even Long Fei Yi doesn't know about it? Bai Yanqing seemed to be somewhat happy. Master, what's the matter? What does the phoenix birthmark look like? Bai Yuqiao asked boldly. Bai Yanqing was in a good mood today. He didn't give Bai Yuqiao any attitude. Instead, he laughed and said to himself, it seems that they don't know the truth. Hee, then this game will be even more interesting. The old man is looking forward to it. Seeing that his master was in a good mood, Bai Yuqiao quickly took the opportunity to ask, Master, when will the good show begin? Even if his master didn't reveal the secret of the phoenix birthmark, he would at least reveal something related to it, right? Bai Yuqiao felt that this matter had something to do with Han Yunxi. Judging from his master's tone, Han Yunxi probably had the birthmark. His master had only interrogated Su Xiaoyu to confirm whether Chu Tianin, Long Fei Yi, and the rest knew what the birthmark meant. A good show. Bai Yanqing stroked his beard with a smile. Wait until the Apricot Woods conference is over. Little lass, this will be the biggest show in Cloud Realm Continent's history. The best show ever. Just you wait. After the Apricot Woods conference, Ning Chung would take care of Chu Tianin as well. It was time for him to head south. As long as Ning Chung did that, he would definitely reveal Long Fei Ye's secret to the public. He'd like to see how Long Fei Yi would fight against Ning Cheng's red coat cannoneers and thousands of cavalry then. Master, that Apricot Woods conference, there's nothing to watch? Bai Yuqiao didn't understand. Bai Yanqing suddenly knitted his brows. Lass, the Apricot Woods conference is Cloud Realm Continent's medical community's greatest gathering. There's plenty to watch, so you have to watch carefully for your master. Medicine and poisons have many similarities. Poisons doctors also fall under the category of medicine. Bai Yanqing's motives for coming to the Apricot Woods conference were simple. Besides investigating Medical City's movements against the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate, he was really here to learn. He wanted to treat this gathering as a vacation to recuperate his body and mind. Only then would he have the energy to fight a proper battle with Long Fei Yi. Bai Yuqiao felt resentful. She wasn't interested in the Apricot Woods conference at all. So she probed. Master, why don't we go take a look at the poison sect's forbidden grounds? That's the birthplace of the poison world after all. Finally, Bai Yanqing fell silent. Bai Yuqiao still wanted to bring up senior brother's matter, but seeing this, she could only shut her mouth obediently. Han Yunqi's group had also arrived at Medical City, arriving a few days earlier than Bai Yanqing. Han Yunqi had gained a new understanding of Gu Beiyue during this trip. This fellow actually knew the fastest mountain path to Medical City, and had taken them over 3 barren mountains without getting lost. Instead, he'd saved them 5 days of travel. Moreover, what Han Yunqi hadn't expected was that Gu Beiyue actually had a large residence in Medical City. Gu Beiyue hadn't even mentioned it the last time they came. Currently, they were inside the residence. Esteemed Wang Fei, 7th young master, look at what this is. Gu Beiyue handed over 3 invitations to the Apricot Woods conference. You're quite capable. Gu glanced at them and gave them a rare compliment. In truth, he could have gotten an invitation to the Apricot Woods conference just the same, but he couldn't be bothered to listen to Luo Zuishan's nagging. I didn't expect you to have such good friends in Medical City, Han Yunqi teased. Gu Beiyue had grown up in Medical City. Although he didn't like to socialize, he still had many friends. Han Yunqi hadn't expected that Gu Beiyue's friends in Medical City would still be willing to help him now that the Commander-in-Chief's estate in South Ning was in trouble, and he was a member of Pill Fiend Pharmacy. What kind of friendship was this? Hee, Dr. Gu, just what are your origins? Gu was the first to speak. In truth, Han Yunqi had also wanted to ask this question along the way, but she didn't know how to broach the subject. Gu Beiyue didn't panic and maintained his warm smile. My surname is Gu. My ancestors have a deep relationship with Medical City's Gu clan. When my grandfather was alive, he was always kind to others. Thanks to him, many of Medical City's great aristocratic families are friends with me. Gu Beiyue smiled and teased. They all think I'm abandoning the dark for the light this time, hee. These were naturally lies. Gu Beiyue's surname wasn't actually Gu. It was just a surname the Shadow Clan had changed to hide their identity. Back when the Shadow Clan hid in Medical City, the Gu clan was Medical City's #1 clan. So the Shadow Clan took on the surname Gu. The Shadow Clan's surname was Gu. They lived their lives as shadows in solitude. Gu Beiyue's real name was Gu Beiyue. He was born on the 15th night of the 8th lunar month, when the bright moon hung high in the sky. Thus, his grandfather gave him the name Yu. Gu wanted to ask more questions, but Gu Beiyue cleverly changed the topic. 7th young master, your surname is also Gu. Perhaps we were even family 500 years ago. Gu instantly lost interest in this topic. He sneered. I'm going out for a walk. It's already late, where are you going? Han Yunqi asked. The Apricot Woods conference was the day after tomorrow. It wouldn't be easy to reach Medical City smoothly. She didn't want anything to happen in the last 2 days. Gu turned back and smiled devastatingly. Poison lass, I'm going to prepare a big gift for Gu Yuntian. Gu Beiyue left for 2 days. He only appeared when Han Yunqi and Gu Beiyue were both at the entrance of the Apricot Woods conference. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.